Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Was Turned Into a Cat? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Izuku was walking back home from the store. His mom sent him to get groceries for the next week, and he was happy to oblige. Ever since the slime incident, he's been training his body. After what All Might said, he realized that he was just sitting and doing nothing, hoping that he would miraculously become a hero with analysis. So he'd been going to a different store than the one right by the apartments, wanting to walk longer distances and get used to carrying weight. Sure, the beach thing has helped a lot, but he wants to be ready. A little extra work never hurt anyone. He was nearing the train station now, and he adjusted his bags when something hard rammed into his legs. He let out a surprised noise, just barely losing his footing. He looked down to see a little boy, snot and tears running down his face as he looked up at him with scared eyes. "I lost my mommy," he wailed, and Izuku bent down, setting his bags down and placing his hands up. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked calmly, and the boy nodded, sniffing loudly and wiping his bare arm across his face as he sat up. Siko Rin," he said shakily, and Izuku nodded, standing up and extending his hand. The boy hesitantly grabbed it, and Izuku gathered up his bags. "Where was the last place you saw them?" he asked, beginning to walk near the station. He's sure they could send out an alert from there. The boy's grip tightened, and he shook his head. I don't know." "Okay, that's okay. We'll go to the adults and they can help you all right." Siko nodded silently, still sniffling as they walked through the station. Izuku felt Siko's hand warm up, and he looked down, seeing him inch closer, away from the crowd of people. "We're almost there, okay?" Siko grabbed onto him tighter, and he felt like something cold got injected into his veins, making him clench his jaw in slight pain. Siko," he said as they neared a worker. Siko looked up at him, his eyes misty. What's your quirk?" he asked, making Siko furrow his eyebrows as he looked down. Hasn't come in yet. But I'm pinky toe negative. It has to come in at some point." Izuku pursed his lips and nodded. He hopes whatever his quirk was won't hurt him in the long run. "Sir, this boy lost his parents." The worker's eyes widened, and he looked to Siko. "Siko Rin? Your parents have been worried sick. Come on, they're right in the back." He held out a hand, but Siko hid behind Izuku. "And maybe I can go with him? He's pretty scared," Izuku suggested, and the worker nodded seriously, waving them in the direction of the manual ticket booth. They went back through an employee entrance, and the worker who helped them out murmured something to his coworker. They walked through a hall, and Izuku suddenly felt dizzy. His body was buzzing uncomfortably, almost painfully, and he slowed down, trying to blink it away. "Are you okay, mister?" Izuku shook his head, taking in a deep breath and smiling down at him. "Let's go get your parents, okay?" he said weakly, and Siko nodded right as the worker opened a door. They were bombarded by scared parents, who shook Izuku's hand and bowed frantically. Izuku smiled to the best of his ability, blood rushing in his ears. His head was hurting massively, and he bowed politely, excusing himself under the pretense of needing to be home. He stumbled back the way he came from, and just made it out the employee entrance as he tripped, the bags of groceries breaking and his food falling out. He groaned in pain, curling in on himself. He really should have asked that kid's parents what their quirks were. What if he's dying? He whimpered. It felt like his bones were moving. His whole body hurt, and he let out one more whimper before it suddenly stopped. Izuku breathed a sigh of relief. He felt like he could cry from that. He moved to get up, when suddenly, sharp white pain exploded all over his body, and he cried out loudly, tears welling up in his eyes. He felt his arms snap back and forth, like they were rearranging. Izuku could barely breathe, let alone make a sound as he suffered. He let out choked noises as his legs did the same. He looked down through blurry vision to see hair growing rapidly on his bare arms, and then his vision went black. The next time Izuku woke up, it was to something jabbing his stomach. He jerked awake and heard a shriek. It's alive, mommy. Get away from that, it could have rabies. A woman's voice said in a hushed voice, and Izuku slowly peeled his eyes open. He must have passed out from all that pain, but why didn't anyone get him to the hospital? He slowly stood up, and he felt all wobbly, disoriented. He looked around and noticed many things at once. His groceries were gone, he was a lot shorter than he remembered, and he has paws. What the F dash? He scrambled around the corner, sliding on his feet and running out of the station, almost getting stepped on in the process. Calm down, Izuku. You just need to get home, everything will be fine after that. He ran until he saw a small park, with ducks and a pond. He noticed the sun was setting, and that sent a jolt of fear through him. Izuku clearly remembers it almost being dark by the time he made it to the station with that boy, so how long was he out? What is his mother thinking right now? He felt his eyes burning, and tears fell down his face or snout now. He's not going to think about it. He skidded to the park and ran to the pond. When he saw his reflection, his small eyes widened. He jerked back in surprise. His eyes were just as green as before, and he had fur all down his body, darker in color and almost black. His breathing picked up and he ran in the direction of where he thinks his apartment is. It's not like he can just ride the train, so he just needs to get there by foot. He ran for what felt like hours before he had to stop. He was too thirsty and hungry to keep going. He stumbled into an alley. The only light was the moon, but Izuku guesses that that boy's quirk fully turned him into a cat. He could see clearly, and his ears would flicker over to any sound, alerting him of potential danger. He took in a deep breath and climbed up a dumpster, slipping once before he fell inside. He landed on a trash bag, and shook his head, ruffling his fur and trying his best to not GG at the stench of the trash. Will he really be able to eat any of this? He clawed at the bag until a hole formed, and he sniffed around, trying to smell something familiar, praying that he won't have to eat anything rotten. He caught a whiff of what he recognizes as chicken, and he dug frantically until he found it. He used his mouth to dig it out. It was fried chicken, and he jumped onto the side of the dumpster before jumping back onto the wet, gross concrete. He ate it like his life depended on it. Izuku didn't call it quits until there was no meat left on the bone, and he was full. Izuku sat down, staring at the now bare bone, wrapping his tail around his legs protectively, and letting his ears flatten against his head. Is this what his life is going to be now? No, he can't do this forever. He needs to find his mom. She can make everything better. They're going to go to a quirk specialist and find that boy. Izuku knows his name. They just need to find him and he can fix it. He heard what he thought were footsteps slowly walking towards him, and his ear perked up, his hair standing on end as he bolted out of the alley. He's in Mizudafu. He recognizes this place. He just needs to get home. Just get home. Izuku trudged along a street. He was almost there. He knows it. He recognizes this neighborhood as Kaken's. He just needs to get a little further. The problem is his legs feel like jelly, and the last time he ate was that chicken drum, and it's way past sunrise now. He hasn't gotten any sleep, and he keeps having to run from dogs that keep chasing him. One of them nipped his leg, and he can feel a small pulsing in it, making him limp slightly. He turned down Kaken Street. Kaken may not want to help him, but Auntie Mitsuki will, and so will Uncle Masaru. If he can just... He saw a tuft of blonde hair walking towards him, sporting a black Aldra uniform, and a deep frown was Kaken. Izuku felt like crying as he limped up to him, wailing loudly to get his attention. Kaken looked at him, and now that Izuku was close, he looked really tired, and almost sad. He pawed at his leg, staring up with pleading eyes. Kaken just clicked his tongue, gently moving him out of the way with his foot, and continued walking. Izuku cried loudly again, racing up to him and batting his leg with his claws out. "It's me. Please, Kaken, don't you recognize me?" Of course, Izuku knows he won't, but he can only hope. "Fafrat. I'm not in the mood." Kaken shoved him back roughly, and Izuku let out a yelp as he fell on his back, hitting his head on the sidewalk. Izuku lay on the concrete, trying to get up but failing. He let out a pitiful whimper. This is how he dies, isn't it? He's too weak to even get up. Now that he's lying down, all he wants to do is sleep forever. "Sheet, I'm sorry." Izuku opened his eyes to see Kaken squatting down, his hand reaching for him. Izuku flinched back, half expecting an explosion, but his ears were gently scratched instead. He let his small shoulders relax, and he felt himself getting scooped up. He blinked to see Kaken holding him at arm's length, his head turning in the direction of his house before back to Izuku. "I have to go to school, just stay here and wait for me." "Okay," he said quietly, setting him down gently and petting him one last time before getting back up and walking away. Izuku stared at his back with wide eyes. He's coming back for him? He's never seen Kaken look so sad and act so gentle ever. He slowly limped down the street, towards the Bakugo residence. It'll just be easier to wait there, he'll have cover on their porch too. He made it to the house, and it felt weird how big it was to him now. It was the same as he remembered it being, and it sent a wave of nostalgia through him. The driveway was empty, so Izuku guesses Mitsuki and Masaru are at work. The day was spent with him sleeping curled up in the corner of the Bakugo's porch, waiting as patiently as one could when they were desperately trying to be human again. He would wake up when he heard birds chirping, the sudden urge to chase it down bubbling to the surface before he shook himself of the thought. It was cloudy today, and they were moving fast along the sky, casting shadows on the brick walkway. Izuku felt his eyes drift shut under the comforting warmth of the sunlight. Izuku woke up to the sounds of small explosions. He jerked awake, seeing Kaken storming up the yard with an angry scowl on his face as he glared at the grass. Izuku slowly got up. Now that he slept, he did feel a little bit better, but he was still starving. He meowed loudly and Kaken stopped, his eyes wide as he looked at him on the porch. He quickly walked up and stared down at him, looking around and then back to Izuku again. "How'd you know where I live?" "Because it's me." All that came out of his mouth was a frantic meow, and Kaken huffed, carefully picking him up and holding him against his chest. Izuku relaxed into the hold. All he wants is to be held by his mom right now, but any form of comfort is appreciated at this point. He heard keys being jingled, and then the sound of the door opening before closing again. "Parents aren't home, I'll make sure we keep you." "I need mom." Izuku let out a pitiful sound, and he was pet soothingly. "It's okay. Are you hungry? What do cats even eat?" Kaken grumbled, still petting him as they walked up the stairs. He set him down on the bed, and Izuku looked away as he shed his clothes. Even though he doesn't know it's Izuku, Kaken probably won't appreciate being watched. Izuku took this time to look around the room. He hasn't been here since he was a child. It was definitely something Kaken would like. Black sheets on the bed, and posters of bands all along the room, a TV and tan walls that had LED lights along the top. Izuku felt the bed dip, making him lose his balance, and he fell on his butt. Kaken chuckled and he looked at him, his big green eyes blinking up at him. Kaken looked at him for a second, his lips in a thin line before he raised his hand up to pet him again. Izuku closed his eyes and felt himself relax. No wonder cats like it so much, it feels really good. "You look like Deku, you know?" Kaken murmured, his voice sounding sad. Izuku's eyes shot open, and he shook his head out of the grip, jumping onto Kaken's lap and pawing at his chest. "The F-dash? Is that your name?" A small smile twitched at his lips before it faded, and he grabbed Izuku, placing him back onto the bed. Izuku let out a frustrated growl and cried loudly. "It's me. Stop being so FNG loud. If you keep doing that we can't keep you, my parents work late hours." He sighed tiredly, getting up and walking towards the door, pointing at him. "Stay there, I'll be back." He grunted and then opened the door. Izuku could hear him running down the stairs, and then the sound of rummaging was heard. He heard loud, quick steps, and then Kaken opened the door quickly. He looked at Izuku and seemed surprised he actually stayed there, but he walked back to the bed with a small smile. "Here, I looked it up, cats can have it." Izuku looked down on the bed to see bread. Izuku's not exactly sure what site he saw that on, but if he could, he would shrug. He watched as Kaken broke it into small pieces, and then shoved some towards Izuku. "Hag." Izuku looked up to see Kaken with his phone to his ear, and he made eye contact. Kaken waved a hand to the bread, and Izuku peeled his eyes away from the blonde to eat it. It was harder than eating the chicken because his spit made it stick to his teeth, but he made it work. "I found a cat. Yes, I brought it in." He's hurt. He paused, seeming to listen to what Mitsuki was saying. Izuku could hear parts of what she was saying, but didn't really understand it. Please, Mom. Izuku looked up to see Kachan's eyes glassy. He was staring at Izuku with pained eyes, and he reached a hand up to pet him. The other end of the phone went silent, before a long sigh could be heard. Yes, I'll clean the litter box every day. I'll take care of him, of course I'm responsible. He bit out and then sighed in relief. I'm not a pet. This might not end well for Izuku if they want to keep him as a pet. No, this isn't about him. He choked out and then swallowed. Can you just get the stuff on the way home? And I think he needs a vet. The rest of the day was spent with Izuku sleeping on Kaken's bed, only waking up when the bed would dip. Izuku woke up, stretching and yawning before he went limp. He felt gentle hands running along his torso, and blinked up to see Kaken doing homework, petting him without looking. He made a small noise, trying to get his attention, and red eyes zeroed in on him immediately. Hi, he grunted, turning back to his work and still scratching him soothingly. Hagg'll be here soon. You know how to use a litter box, right? You don't act like an outdoor cat. He ruffled his stomach playfully, and Izuku let out a weird, annoyed chirping noise that he had no idea he was capable of making. Kaken's lips twitched upwards, and he went back to what he was doing. What could be making him so sad? Izuku got up and pawed at his paper, earning a soft shove in return. He huffed. He wants to know how long he's been gone. It couldn't have been that long, right? 2 or 3 days is Izuku's best guess. Could that be why Kaken looks so sad? But he's giving him what he wants by being gone, isn't he? Izuku felt his ears flatten against his head at that, his tail swishing behind him. Kaken's only treating him like this because he doesn't know he's not just some random cat, he's Izuku. Izuku stared at the bed sheets as he walked away, sliding off the bed and landing with a thump. He crawled under the bed and curled up towards the middle. He might as well just wait down here. He heard the door slam open, and he jerked up, hitting his head on the bed frame. He let out a small yelp and scrambled out from under the bed, shaking his head and squeezing his eyes shut through the pain. What did you do? Kaken asked, and Izuku looked up at him, his eyes watering. Kaken went to grab him, but Izuku moved out of the way, batting the hand away. Kaken growled in frustration. Come on, Deku, my parents want to see you, don't be difficult. Izuku hissed angrily at him. You don't get to tell me what to do anymore. I'm tired. Kaken tried to grab him again, and Izuku scrambled under the bed, just out of arm's reach. Katsuki! Kaken tapped his hand on the floor, feeling around for Izuku. Yeah. He grunted out. Come on, Deku. He clicked his tongue in quick succession, and Izuku rolled his eyes. He's not an actual cat. Izuku settled down, watching Kachan's fingers wiggle around playfully. His eyes followed as Kaken's hand jerked around, and Izuku found himself tensing, preparing himself to attack. Kaken's hand would stop every so often, and Izuku found the pattern, so he lunged for it, landing on his hand and playfully biting it. Got you, beach. Got ya. Izuku didn't have a second to react as another hand shot to him and grabbed him by the scruff. Izuku squeaked, but his body tensed up as he was dragged out from under the bed, his limbs drawn up to his body. He felt so vulnerable like this, he couldn't move and his tail swished angrily. Kaken held him out and smirked at him before bringing him to his chest and holding him firmly. He didn't let go of his scruff as he walked down the stairs, probably thinking he would claw at him. Izuku was really considering it at this point. All he wanted to do was scratch that smug look off his face earlier. What took you so long? He heard Mitsuki grumble, and he meowed weakly, feeling his scruff being released. He jerked around in the hold, extending his claws and jumping down. That's why. The little sheet decided he's in a bad mood now. Izuku backed up under the kitchen table, hissing angrily. You deserve it. Aw, come here, baby. Is the brat being mean to you? He is, isn't he? Mitsuki cooed, and Izuku scurried to her, jumping into her arms. She let out a surprised laugh, hugging him to her chest as she pet him. Aw, let's keep him, babe. Izuku looked over to see Masaru sitting at the table. He looked at Izuku with soft eyes and shrugged. As long as Katsuki takes care of him, dear. He said quietly. All right, Mitsuki sighed, turning around and handing Izuku to Katsuki. Izuku looked up at him and felt his ears being scratched. "Katsuki, I know you're stressed about Izuku, but it's only been 4 days, they'll find him." "Where's the stuff?" Katsuki said through gritted teeth. Izuku opened his eyes, looking at Mitsuki and Masaru. They were both looking at Katsuki with saddened eyes, and Izuku felt like wincing. "It's almost already been a week?" "They'll give up. Everyone in the room knows that no one cares enough about a quirkless teenager to spend longer than a week." Izuku shoved his face in the crook of Kachin's elbow. "They'll never know that he's right here, that he's not dead or kidnapped. I'll help you get it to your room," Masaru said softly after a moment. Izuku watched as Kakin and Masaru set up his litter box, water and food bowl. His tail flickered in annoyance and disgust. There was no way in hell he was eating that. And shitting in a litter box? That's the most embarrassing thing he'll ever have to do in his life. Maybe he can go outside? But even that makes him shudder. Out in the open for anyone to see like that makes him embarrassed just thinking about it. After they finished, Masaru hesitantly left, standing by the doorway with pursed lips before he softly shut the door. Katsuki's hands were clenched by his sides, shaking from the strain, and his jaw was clenched as he stared at the floor. He walked over to Izuku wordlessly and picked him up, setting him in front of everything. "This is where you sheet and PSS, if you do it on the carpet you'll regret it." Izuku hunched his shoulders at the glare he got, his ears going back. "This is your food and water, you're probably starving, here." He scooted Izuku closer, but he just stared at it in disgust. He looked back up to Kakin with pleading eyes. "Please don't make me." But he could feel his stomach growling, and when he got a whiff of the food, it didn't smell as bad as he thought it would. Maybe he's just that hungry. He hesitantly took a bite, crunching on it slowly and dramatically. He didn't want his tongue to touch the food, but it did anyway, and he was fully expecting to GG and spit it out. But it wasn't as bad as he expected it to be. Sure, it was still gross, it was cat food, but he ate it quickly after that, drinking water like his life depended on it. After he was full and satisfied, he felt quite tired, and walked over to the bed, jumping on it and laying on a pillow. Kakin was doing homework, and he didn't want to bother him, so he curled up, feeling his eyes drift shut. Izuku woke up to the sound of cussing, and he slowly opened his eyes, stretching and yawning wide. He looked over to Kakin, seeing him using hand-held weights. He had on a black tank top, his muscles showing as sweat rolled down his body. Kachin's brows were furrowed like he was trying to not have an outburst, and he had earbuds in. He set down the weights, letting out a strained breath, and puffing out his cheeks with the motion. He walked over to the bed and plopped down on it, and Izuku walked over to him, setting his front paws on his chest. Kakin looked over to him with a raised eyebrow, like he was asking why he was bothering him. But Izuku can't say he's even sure. For some reason he just wants attention right now. He got onto his chest fully, his paws together as he stared at him expectantly. Kakin still hasn't figured it out? Izuku clenched his paws, his claws extending some, and he flexed and unflexed them. This calmed him for some reason, and he pawed deeper when Kakin started petting him, his claws sinking into the fabric of his tank top before retracting again. Izuku remembers reading about it. It's called kneading? It's not like he really cares. This is the one time he's felt calm in the past few days. He slowly lay down on his stomach, closing his eyes and breathing deeply, feeling a happy vibration from deep in his chest. At first he was a little scared, but then he realized it was just purring and he wasn't dying from a motorcycle driving around in his small body. Izuku was about to fall asleep when he was gently lifted up and set down on the bed. He fell asleep like that. Izuku woke up to scratching behind his ear. He blinked and lifted his head up, seeing Kakin staring at him. "I'm sorry, bud, you gotta go to the vet today." Izuku's eyes widened, and he sat up. He walked over to Kakin and got onto his lap, putting his paws on his chest so he was standing up and meowed. "Please don't make me go, I'm not a cat." Kakin huffed out a breath, petting his back. "Sometimes I think you can understand me," he said quietly, and his lips twitched downward. He was about to move him out of the way, but Izuku nuzzled into his neck. He could tell that Kakin was upset, and he hates seeing him like that. "It's not right." Kaken didn't push him away, he ran his hands through his fur and pet him, and Izuku purred loudly. Maybe that will help him calm down? It helps Izuku calm down. He heard Kaken sigh shakily, and he was brought closer, like he was being hugged like a stuffed animal, except it was gentle. I'm sorry, Deku. Kaken whispered hoarsely, and Izuku let out a quiet noise. I forgive you. Izuku was put inside a small animal carrier. He wanted to put up a fight, but they were already dealing with enough right now. He knows it's the weekend because Kaken came with them. It was Masaru and Kaken, Mitsuki was at work, and the air was tense. Kaken unzipped part of the carrier to pet Izuku, most likely to calm him down, which he appreciated. The drive seemed to take forever, with the painful silence other than the occasional noise of the blinker being turned on. It made Izuku's head hurt. Izuku felt himself being carried again, and his nerves shot up. He started meowing loudly. What if he has to get shots? Or what if they fix him? It's okay. Just a checkup. Kaken said, but it didn't do much to ease his nerves. Checkups always lead to something else. Izuku curled up as they waited, enjoying the soothing pets he got during that time. But it ended all too soon. Bakugu! Someone called, making Izuku cry out. They started moving once the carrier was zipped up, and Izuku felt like he was going to be sick. Let's see what we have here. A female voice said, and then he was set down on something hard. Is he violent? Okay, does he have a favorite? I heard him making noises of protests, and someone familiar might be helpful. Yeah, me I guess. Kaken said gruffly, and Izuku watched from the inside as he unzipped it. Come here. He clicked his tongue, and Izuku squeezed his eyes shut as he came out. His heart was beating frantically, and he was really scared, but the Bakugus are already going through enough. So he went straight to his arms, shoving his nose into his elbow and shaking. Kaken pet him soothingly. Is that normal? He didn't act like this the other day. Kaken asked. Izuku could hear the worry in his voice. It was weird for him. His stress levels are pretty high. He might have some level of intelligence to know what's going on. Kaken shifted his hold. Yeah, I know this sounds weird, but he listens to me. For the most part. He grumbled that last sentence, earning a chuckle from the woman. Izuku relaxed into Kaken's hold. Maybe they forgot about him? Okay, let me see him. Does he have a name? Kaken went to set him down, but Izuku grabbed onto his shirt with his claws, making Kaken pull him away harder. His face was flushing and his brows were furrowed. Let go. He gritted out. He seemed embarrassed, but Izuku could care less. He meowed loudly again. Here, my quirk can help if that's okay. Izuku looked at the woman, his eyes wide. That's fine, Masaru said, standing up and walking over to them. Kaken looked like he wasn't sure, but he didn't say anything. He felt a gentle touch to his head, right behind his ears, and he felt his body relax. Suddenly he wasn't scared anymore, and his claws retracted as he was set down on the cold metal table. What, is he okay? Kaken asked, petting him. Izuku started purring immediately. Yes, my quirk can calm animals down. I can also get a read on the stress levels to see how much of my quirk to use. It's almost like pheromones in a way. The woman started petting him and checking him over. He seems pretty healthy. I see his leg has some dried blood on it. I'll clean that up and we'll take some blood and do immunizations for him. Sound good? She got a grunt from Kaken and a hum from Masaru. He got his wound cleaned. Thankfully it wasn't too bad, but they would need to keep an eye on it. He got his blood drawn, which spiked fear in him, but the woman's quirk helped calm him down. The part he was the most nervous for was the shots, because what will it do to him? He's human, he doesn't know the specifics of that boy's quirk, so what if it kills him? Deku, calm down. Kaken grunted when Izuku sunk his claws into him, hissing. He seems to know exactly what's going on here. He tried to inch away from the touch, but he had nowhere to go, and he let out a whimper when she touched him. She furrowed her brows, biting her bottom lip as he felt her quirk take control. This'll be quick, okay? She said softly, and Izuku closed his eyes as his scruff was grabbed, and he felt a sharp pain inside. He got a few shots and then something for fleas. Do you want to chip him? The woman asked, and Izuku was too out of it to understand what she meant by that. He'll be an inside cat, Kaken said, and Masaru hummed. Just in case, Katsuki. Kaken grumbled something, and then he was gently grabbed again. The pain was sharper than the first time, and he let out a small surprised noise. You did so good. What did you say his name was? Deku. Kaken replied, pacing a limp Izuku in the carrier. Katsuki, I thought you liked him? Masaru said as he zipped it up. Yes, I do. It's just his name. He grumbled. The woman started saying something again, but Izuku felt his eyes slipping shut. Today was so exhausting. Now he knows why animals hate the vet. The next time Izuku woke up, he was being pet gently, and the carrier was being shaken slightly. Wake up, Kaken said, and Izuku slowly got out, slumping on the bed right as he did. Kaken got on the bed too, and Izuku closed his eyes, ready to fall asleep again when Kaken tapped the bed, clicking his tongue. Come here, he said softly, and Izuku got up, walking over and plopping down right next to him. Kaken put his arm around him and brought him close. Izuku felt warm and safe. But despite that, he wanted to cry and scream. He wants his mom, he wants to go to school and finish cleaning the beach. He was so close to finishing it too, but now he can't do any of that. His life is so effed right now. Izuku looked up, Kaken's eyes were closed, and his breathing was evening out. It's weird to see this side of Kaken. Izuku never would have thought he was an animal person, and if he was, he wouldn't expect him to talk so much and be so comforting. Izuku is glad for that though. He doesn't know what he would do if he never decided to go down Kaken Street. It's been a month since Izuku's been living with the Bakugus, and life has a routine now. The school year is almost done, and Izuku is trying his best to not be sad. But it's not working. He's been trying to distract himself. Sometimes he'll hunt down bugs around the house when Kaken won't play with him. And the Bakugo house has been getting even more gloomy. One time, Izuku listened in on Aunt Mitsuki talking to his mom on the phone. There were a lot of tears, and Izuku didn't come out from under Kaken's bed for a whole day after that. The blonde has 2 months until the entrance exam, and Izuku's had to calm him down when he starts getting agitated. Sometimes he even sets off his quirk, and Izuku has the urge to run and hide. Kaken was at school, and Izuku was laying in a sun spot on the carpet, his eyes closed and enjoying the heat when the front door opened. Izuku's ears twitched, and his heart picked up speed. No one's supposed to be home yet. He quickly got up, his body tense and on high alert as he heard footsteps coming up the stairs. The door opened, and Izuku relaxed when he saw it was just Mitsuki. "Hi baby," she said happily, and Izuku ran up to her, purring loudly when he was picked up and pet. "Today we're going somewhere. Do you want to be a support animal?" she asked, nuzzling her nose on his. Izuku perked up, rubbing his face over hers. That sounds like a good idea. Then he could go with Kaken wherever he goes, and he won't be so bored all the time. Mitsuki placed him in the carrier, and they went off. "You'll do a bunch of tests, but I think you'll pass. You're so smart. Aren't you?" she cooed, and Izuku would laugh if he could. The whole ride was spent with Mitsuki talking to him. Izuku likes that both Kaken and Mitsuki talk to him. He doesn't know what he would do if he was treated like an actual cat. Technically, he is an actual cat, and they do treat him like one, but after the doctor's visit, they talk to him like they expect him to speak back. Only Masaru really treats him like a cat, but that's mostly because he doesn't have much to say to. When they made it to the destination, Izuku was kind of nervous, but he wanted this to work. Mitsuki was asked a bunch of questions, and then she had to fill out paperwork, most likely about his medical history and such. By the time that was done, Izuku was ready to get out and move around. "Bakugu," someone called, and then he was being carried around. "Right this way, ma'am. We'll be doing a few tests to see how he reacts in stressful situations, like how he'll deal with panic attacks and such. If we deem him safe, we'll have him come here every weekend to go to classes. We have trainers that are the best here, and by 3 weeks' time, he should have his certificate." A make voice said, and Izuku nodded. "It sounds like a good plan. Wow, that sounds great. He's a sweetheart, and he already helps my son so much. Ever since we got him, Katsuki's calmed down a bunch. His friend went missing right around the same time, and I don't know how he would have reacted if it weren't for Deku. The man hummed. I'm sorry, he said gloomily, and then they were brought into a big room. He was set onto the ground and then let out. He was immediately picked up by a child and he jerked in surprise, but didn't move away. Is this the high-stress situation? Hopefully he won't get his tail pulled off. He played with some young children, maybe 8 or 9 years old, as Mitsuki and a few other adults sat at tables. There were other cats too, and Izuku found himself playing with them. Izuku tried talking to them, but they weren't interested. He didn't take it to heart though. He's not sure if cats even actually talk to each other. Then, when that was over, he was brought into a different room, where they examined him and gave him commands. They said it was just for the hell of it, but when Izuku followed them easily, everyone was pretty shocked. Izuku went home with the go-ahead to do the lessons, and he'd never been more excited. He was dropped off, because Mitsuki had to go back to work, so he got to walk around the house and think. He hasn't seen his mom in forever, and he's worried about her. He misses her more than anything, and Izuku doesn't want her to think that he left willingly, or that he was kidnapped and murdered. His mom already had enough to worry about, it's not fair on her. Izuku sat in the middle of the living room. What if he never sees her again? He shook his head, he can't think like that. His mom is best friends with Mitsuki, she has to come over at some point, right? Izuku was supposed to go to his final class to become a certified service animal today. He'll be graduating, so to speak. This whole thing was supposed to be a surprise for Kaken, and Izuku's not sure how he'll react. A part of Izuku thinks he won't really care, but another part of him thinks he'll be insulted by it. Kaken never wants to accept help from anyone, so why would he accept it from him? This whole service animal thing is easy to Izuku, but he also has a human intelligence, so he's not sure if it's fair to the other cats. Izuku's been learning how to comfort his owner, as the trainers like to say. Comforting consists of placing his paws on Kaken's chest and gently pawing at his face. It also consists of liking his jawline or anywhere he can reach for comfort. He's tried it a couple of times, it actually seemed to work, and other ones like climbing into his lap and giving him a grounding weight, nudging him roughly with his nose and head, and purring loudly, though Izuku came up with that one on his own. He does this when, as the trainer said and acted out, because Izuku's not supposed to understand what he's saying, Kaken starts to breathe irregularly, his voice raises in volume, he's crying, or if he just seems off. Another part of being a service animal is alerting someone close by. Izuku practically becomes a siren, or he'll run to someone and hopefully they're smart enough to understand what a cat with a service vest on chasing after them and pawing at their leg means. So here he is, sitting in the car inside his carrier. They went under the pretense of a vet checkup, and Kaken got really set off about it, saying he didn't understand why he couldn't go with them. Izuku could tell that he was worried, that he probably thought something was wrong, and Izuku wanted nothing more than to comfort him, but he'll have to wait. When Izuku and Mitsuki got to the classes, he was ready. He's been putting all the stuff he's learning into practice with Kaken, and he knows he's going to get certified. Even all the trainers and workers knew he was going to. All the classes are just mandatory. The class went as usual, with Izuku getting more treats than usual and going through a mock situation. And an hour later, he's getting his vest put on, and Mitsuki's getting the proper paperwork and the license for proof. If Izuku could smile, he would. The ride home was spent with Izuku fidgeting nervously. He hopes Kaken likes it. He put all this work into memorizing everything, and Mitsuki spent all that money. Izuku's just not sure. Katsuki has gotten better these past 2 months, and he'll be going to UA for sure, but he still has a temper that scares him. Sometimes, when Kaken gets really angry, it reminds him of middle school, of how he used to hurt him. Kaken always reserved the worst of his anger for him. So what if he decides that Izuku was looking down on him somehow? What if he just gets rid of him, or explodes him? Izuku shuddered at the thought, his tail swishing back and forth, and he waited in anticipation. When they got home, Izuku thought he was going to be sick, and he watched through the mesh of the carrier as Mitsuki opened the door, painstakingly slow. Hag, what's wrong with him? Kaken yelled, walking up to them and practically snatching Izuku away. He heard Mitsuki chuckle, and then Kaken growl as he was set down. Come on, Deku, Kaken said, unzipping the carrier. Izuku didn't move, he was on the fence of actually listening, or just staying in the cat carrier forever? We have a surprise for you, cat. He heard Masaru say, and Kaken furrowed his eyebrows, turning his head away and looking up. It was silent for a moment. Well, spit it out, damn it. There was a fond sigh. Go on, get Deku out. Kaken looked at him again, his face pinched in confusion, and Izuku slowly got out without any more prompting, his tail almost in between his legs as he kept his head down. He went straight into Kaken's arms, shoving his face into his shirt and trying to hide. What the F is wrong with him? Kaken asked, and then Izuku felt his HRS getting played with before he was picked up under his armpits. He stared into Kaken's somewhat worried eyes before he gently put his paws on his mouth, earning a snort from all the Bakugus. We got him certified as a support animal. He's been going for the past 2 months. You can legally take him wherever you go, that means school too. Mitsuki said excitedly. Izuku could see the gears turning in Kaken's head, and he was surprised that he hadn't seen anger yet. So that's why he acts like a mother, he said, rolling his eyes as he brought him to his chest and stood up. Thanks, he mumbled, and when Mitsuki gasped dramatically, he growled and stomped up the stairs. He placed Izuku on his bed and carefully took his harnesses off, petting him as he sat down. Izuku watched as he stared at him, biting his lip with a contemplative look on his face. I won't be taking you to school, at least not Aldra. I don't need to be seen as weak, he said, a slight scowl forming on his face, making Izuku shrink. When we get into UA, I'll take you though. Deku always wanted to go there too, he said quietly, and Izuku had a feeling that was only meant for Kaken, not Izuku. He stood up and crawled onto his lap, nudging his neck with his cold nose and liking him. Kaken chuckled, wrapping his arms around him. They teach you that at the place you went to? Izuku ignored him, sinking his claws into his collarbone and earning a small hiss in pain. Serves him right. Izuku was sleeping in a sunspot on the bed, waiting for Kaken to come back from school. Or he should say Yue. Kaken was nervous even though he didn't want to admit it, so Izuku worked his magic. He wanted to go with Kaken, but he's guessing it would be too crazy to do that. Plus, Izuku never really liked big crowds. He's totally not upset about missing his only chance at being a hero. He can't, and he never will be able to be a hero. Sometimes he wonders why he even tried in the first place. He rejected All Might's offer for a quirk, so maybe this was the universe's sick way of telling him he couldn't be a hero, making him watch the person who hates him the most in the world become everything he wanted to be. And the really funny part? Izuku's helping him do it. He's helping his bully become the greatest hero the world will ever see, and he can't find it in himself to be mad about it. Frustrated? Yes, he's more frustrated than he's been in his entire life. Sad? Depressed? He's been depressed his whole life. This just added the sprinkles on top. But he's not mad about helping him. He's forgiving Kaken every day. He has to. Even though he said he forgave him, there are moments when he wonders why he's even here. He could leave if he wanted to, but he loves Kaken. Izuku's seeing a side of him that he's never seen before, the side that he's always wanted to see. It makes his stomach sink when he thinks about how Kaken would never act this way if he knew it were really Izuku, but he doesn't, and Izuku's selfish. So he'll enjoy every bit of love and affection he gets from him. Izuku blinked when he heard the front door slamming open, but no footsteps on the staircase. Izuku stretched, yawning wide and jumping off the bed, trotting out the room and sitting at the top of the stairs. He heard murmurs, and his ears twitched as he tried to listen. Izuku didn't need to listen anymore as he barreled down the stairs, but what he saw gave him a pause. Mitsuki and Masaru were sitting on the couch, with Mitsuki in her husband's arms as he wiped her face with a tissue. The F is going on? What about Inko? Katsuki asked angrily. Izuku creeped behind the couch unnoticed, listening. Honey, Mitsuki let out a sob, and it was deathly quiet. Izuku's ears went back, trying to piece together what auntie means. He knows it can't be good, and it's scaring him. Someone took a deep breath, and then Masaru spoke. Dear, she passed away, he said shakily, and he heard a sharp intake of breath, Izuku's own heart dropping to the depths of his stomach as he stared at the floor with wide eyes. And the police have been investigating, and they say Izuku most likely committed suicide. Katsuki, did he seem depressed to you? It was silent, save for heavy frantic breathing, and Izuku's ears were flat against his head now as he cowered, slowly turning back towards the stairs. He can't listen to this right now, he can't listen to this ever. This is some sick nightmare he's having. He's going to wake up, and he's going to forget it ever happened. He trudged to the room, and sank to the floor right by the bed, his body shaking as he let out small whimpers. Why would she die? How could she die? His mom was in perfect health last he checked, and he doesn't want to think of the alternative ways someone could die. He could feel his eyes burning with tears before they fell, and then he heard screaming downstairs, causing him to jolt upright. He stared at the open door as he heard stomping up the stairs, and then Kaken came barreling in, slamming his door loudly, the sound reverberating throughout the whole house. He was breathing heavy, and he brought his hands up to his head, yanking at his hair. Izuku took in a deep breath, about to try and calm him down when he let out a loud sob, and then he started throwing things. Kaken tore down his bookshelf, causing Izuku to flinch, his eyes wide. He threw and broke anything he could get his hands on, and one thing almost hit Izuku, causing him to let out a yelp as he scurried under the bed. Phew. Kaken screamed. And Izuku squeezed his eyes shut as his ears flattened on his head, his whole body shaking as he lay down as flat and as small as he could. He's not sure how long it lasted, but by the time he heard a heavy thump, and then heavy labored breathing, he wet his lips as he crawled out from under the bed. His room was a wreck, torn up books and his posters shredded off his walls. The small trash can he had in his room was on the floor with its contents littered about. Kaken was sitting at the edge of his bed, his knees drawn up to his chest as he cried silently. Izuku timidly walked up to him, his tail in between his legs as he gently pawed at Kaken's thigh. The blonde didn't acknowledge him, and he nudged his side roughly with his nose. He purred as loud as he could at that moment, fighting his own sadness for Kaken. Go away, Kaken said weakly, giving Izuku a pause. He stared up at Kaken, whose face was still hidden from his view. His breathing slowed to almost normal now, but Izuku wasn't fooled, he was hurting. He meowed quietly, pawing at his thigh again, and Kaken pushed him away gently, sniffing. Izuku was getting frustrated. Can't he see he's just trying to help? He meowed louder this time, nudging his nose into his thigh harder, and Kaken growled angrily. I said get away. He yelled breathlessly, shoving Izuku back hard enough to make him fall. He let out a surprised squeak, scrambling to get up. Kaken looked guilty, and Izuku meowed sadly at him, staying where he was and laying down. Can't he see he's just as sad if not more? Izuku feels like he's drowning, like there's a black hole where his heart should be. Izuku spent a week moping around and comforting Kaken. Apparently they were supposed to go to the funeral soon. It was a joint one, which just made it worse. Izuku is literally going to go to his own funeral. He's been trying his best to support Kaken, but every day it just gets harder and harder. He's never going to see his mom again. That thought enters his mind as soon as he wakes up, and it haunts his dreams. He knows Kaken isn't supposed to know this, but he and Izuku were eavesdropping on a conversation between Mitsuki and Masaru one night, and found out that his mom killed herself. As soon as they heard it, they immediately regretted listening in. It wasn't fair. What if she just waited a little longer? He was right here the whole time. Izuku's been moving to sleep under the bed after Kaken falls asleep. He likes how dark it is. He doesn't feel so exposed like that. He feels like he's alone for once. The next week, they had the funeral. It was quick and painful. Izuku didn't pay attention when they went up and talked about the happy memories with her. He stuck with Kaken the whole time, who refused to go up to the caskets, even when his parents told him it would be a good idea. For closure they said, what a load of bullshit. Izuku was carried out of the church room, and he nudged Kaken's neck with his damp nose, hearing his breathing pick up. Kaken walked quickly down the hall, and they soon found themselves outside, in a small courtyard with concrete benches and a garden. It really was beautiful. It was sunny with white fluffy clouds adorning the sky, and there was a breeze in the air, sending leaves and flower petals from the trees flying in the air. Kaken whispered hoarsely, sitting down on a bench, facing the garden as he held Izuku closer. Izuku did his best to comfort him. He tried to purr, but he just couldn't. He hasn't been able to purr in a while. He stuck to liking Kachan's jaw, nuzzling into his neck when he heard his breath hitch. "This is my fault," he said shakily. "They're both dead because of me. I told him to die, to kill himself. I'm so stupid." Izuku nudged him harder. "That's not true. I'm not dead. Deku's dead. He's never coming back and I'm never going to see him again. I'm never going to apologize for how shitty I treated him. For no FING reason. What was the point? Why can't I just talk through my feelings instead of ruining everything?" Kachan's whole body was shaking now, his shoulders shaking as Izuku felt his fur getting wet with tears. Izuku meowed loudly. It's not his fault, it never was. And Izuku's not dead, he not FNG dead and nobody will ever FNG know. He didn't kill himself, he wouldn't kill himself. There might have been a time when he thought about it, but now he hates himself for letting the thought even cross his mind. What is he going to do now? Izuku almost had the life squeezed out of him as Kaken cried into his fur, but he didn't mind. It was the only thing that was keeping him together at this point. By the time Kaken's breathing evened out, Izuku could hear the organ playing loudly inside. It was a beautiful song they were playing, but it didn't remind him of his mom. His mom was always smiling, at least he thought she was. How could he be so stupid and not realize how much she was hurting? How long was she suffering without him even noticing? Kaken's breath would hitch every now and then, but other than that, Izuku didn't feel any new tears on his fur and HRSS. The doors opened, and Izuku and Kaken could hear the organ playing louder for a brief moment before the doors shut, and the sound of people talking quietly among themselves replaced the quiet serenity they had. Kaken immediately got up, probably not wanting to get caught in the pity conversations, and walked quickly to the door, wiping his face with his sleeve. "Why am I even here?" Kaken whispered into his ear, and Izuku nuzzled into his neck, getting held closer in response. Izuku couldn't see where they were going, but he could hear more people walking by. "Katsuki, don't just walk off like that, okay?" Mitsuki said, getting closer with rushed steps. He heard Kaken huff an annoyed breath, but he didn't say anything else as they left. Izuku was held on Kachan's lap as they drove away. Apparently they were going to someone's house for an after-party. With food and everything, but Izuku knows Kaken's not hungry. It's been a struggle to get him to eat on a regular schedule, let alone eat extra. He looked up to see Kaken already staring at him, his eyes red-rimmed and his eyelashes clumped together with tears. A hand reached up and pet his ears, and Izuku closed his eyes, forcing himself to take a deep breath and swallow the lump forming in his throat. Everything will be fine. Izuku waited impatiently on Kachan's bed, the letter from UA sitting at his feet as he fidgeted. It was given to him by Mitsuki, and Izuku thinks this is the only good thing to happen in the past 2 weeks. He's not sure how exactly Kaken did during the exams, but he knows he passed. He heard the door click open and he perked up, carefully picking up the letter with his mouth and shifting his weight excitedly on the edge of the bed. Kaken walked in, sighing heavily as he shrugged his backpack off, and went to his dresser. Izuku rolled his eyes, meowing in between the letter in his mouth. Kaken turned around, his eyes immediately darting to the letter. His eyebrows rose slightly and he walked over, plopping on the edge of the bed and gently taking it. Izuku waited with bated breath as he turned it over, feeling the weight of it in his hands, but he didn't open it. Izuku pawed at his leg, bumping him with his body and meowing impatiently. "Wait, damn it." He mumbled tiredly, glaring at the letter like it would burn a hole through it. Kaken sighed, picking him up with one arm, and he carried him over to his desk. He set Izuku on his lap, and he got comfortable as he opened it, watching as he pulled out a paper, and then some kind of metal disc. He set the metal disc down, making a small metallic noise on the polished wood, and he cleared his throat as he opened the letter. "Dear Baku Dash," Kaken started aloud, and they both jerked when a bright light erupted from the small disc, showing a projection of who Izuku recognizes as Nizu, the principal of UA. "Hello Bakugo Katsuki. My name is Nizu, the principal here at UA. I'm here to inform you of a job well done on your written exam, with a score of 97%. Kaken clicked his tongue, and Izuku's tail twitched in annoyance. One thing that hasn't changed about Kaken is that nothing's good enough unless it's the best. Now, for the practical exam, you got 77 villain points. The highest score among that category, well done Bakugu. Izuku shifted, the way that was worded seemed off. But that's not the only thing we grade on at UA. What hero school wouldn't reward heroic behavior? You got 10 rescue points, earning you a total score of 87 points. Congratulations Bakugu, welcome to your hero academia. The projection showed what looked like a scoreboard, and Izuku stiffened when he saw that Kaken wasn't first place. It was someone named Shinso Hitoshi. Kaken clicked his tongue and turned the projection off, and Izuku turned around, nuzzling into his neck and liking him. I'm fine Deku. He grumbled, and Izuku paused, because was he really? Izuku remembers getting a higher score than him one time, and he got beat up because of it. He begrudgingly listened though, rubbing his head against him to scratch his forehead. Izuku sat on Kaken's lap as they drove to UA. The rest of the school year went by slowly and painfully, and living with the fact that his mom is dead didn't make it any better. Izuku often found himself not eating or drinking, only forcing himself to when he saw how worried Kaken was getting. He knows he needs to set a good example and help Kaken heal, but it's been so hard. Whoever said it gets easier with time had to be lying, because every day it just seems to get worse and worse. Spring break wasn't too bad though. Kaken took him on walks more frequently because he had more free time. It was nice getting to spend quality time with the blonde. Izuku didn't realize how much he missed it. He had all of Kaken's attention. The way Kaken looks at him so fondly makes his heart swell with warmth. Izuku always wanted this, always wanted to be seen by Kaken. Sure, the circumstances are less than ideal, but Izuku feels like they're finally friends. Izuku jumped out of the car, meowing excitedly as Kaken got out, his backpack on one shoulder. Mitsuki and Masaru chuckled, getting out too. They were supposed to go over the details of Izuku's support animal license and paperwork, and other restrictions and possible triggers that Kaken doesn't have, as the blonde likes to say. But Izuku knows that suicide and bullying will be for both of them, but Kaken hasn't told anyone about what he told Izuku. And Izuku's not mad at him per se, but he is frustrated. Okay, maybe he's a little mad, but admitting something like that takes time, and Izuku knows Kaken regrets it, and that he's sorry. They walked to the gates, and were greeted by a man in all black and a white scarf thing around his neck. As they got closer, he nodded to them. Bakugus, I'm Aizawa Shoyuda, I'll be Bakugu Katsuki's homeroom teacher for the year, nice to meet you. He bowed politely, and he looked down at Izuku, shoving his face into his scarf along with his hands into his pockets before turning around. Follow me please, we'll be meeting with Principal Nizu. He said gruffly, taking long strides. Izuku was the first to follow, trotting up to his side and staring up at him as he did. Izuku couldn't help but think he looked familiar, and he pet his head to the side. Aizawa looked down at him, a small smile making his way onto his face that somehow didn't seem to fit. It was nice nonetheless, and Izuku looked forward once again, hearing the Bakugus walking close behind. As they walked through the halls, Izuku took it all in with wide, awe-filled eyes, his small mouth slightly parted. This place was huge. Sure, he knew it from all the times he'd looked it up, fantasizing about him being a student here. But actually being here is a whole other experience. Maybe it's also because he's smaller now. Izuku almost rammed into Aizawa when the man stopped in front of a door. Izuku looked up to see a sign that read, Nizu, on it. Deku Simir. Kaken said gruffly, and Izuku peeled his eyes away and walked over, letting himself be picked up. The door opened wide, and he could hear Aizawa sigh loudly. Welcome. Come in. A chipper voice said, and Izuku peered into the room as they walked in. Please, sit down. Would you like some tea? Nizu asked politely, and all the Bakugus slowly sat down. Izuku feels so weird being here. This is Nizu, probably the smartest being in the world. And he just offered 3 strangers and a cat some tea. Well, technically he didn't offer Izuku any tea, but he could dream. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Nizu, Mitsuki said, extending a hand. Nizu smiled wide and extended his paw, Masaru doing the same after. Oh, the pleasure is all mine, thank you. Now. He clapped his paws together, his beady eyes zeroing in on Izuku, making him inch closer into Kaken's chest. We're just here to go over a few things with paperwork and such. I'll make it super painless. Not to worry. He stared at Izuku for a little longer, and Izuku's eyes darted to the side before going back, but seeing Nizu already looking at Mitsuki and Masaru. I assume you brought all the documents? Both Bakugas nodded, handing a small stack of papers held together by a paperclip. Yes, sir, we'd also like to talk with you and Mr. Aizawa privately after. She looked over to Kaken, raising her eyebrows like she was daring him to object. Kaken stiffened in his seat, his hold on Izuku slightly tighter. Huh? Why the F? Izuku dug his claws into Kaken's thigh, earning a hiss of pain as he looked down sharply at him. Izuku held his gaze innocently, kneading his paws as he did it. Kaken glared at him, not looking away as he spoke. Whatever. He grumbled, slumping further in his seat and glaring out the window, petting Izuku. Izuku looked around the room, making eye contact with Aizawa again. The man held his gaze, non-blinking. Izuku looked away. It was getting kind of awkward, and Izuku turned back into the conversation, looking at Nizu as he spoke. Isn't it? Cats are very smart creatures. People don't give them enough credit. He looked to Izuku and smiled at him, yet it somehow seemed fake. When did you get him? He questioned, eyes finding Kaken's. Izuku looked up at the boy, feeling him tense slightly before relaxing again. I was on my way to school and he ran up to me, crying and being really loud. He cleared his throat awkwardly. Well, he was hurt, but I had to go to school, so I told him to. Wait. He snorted, shaking his head and looking down at Izuku. When I got home from school, he wasn't there, he sighed, looking back up. I got upset, I'm not even sure why, a lot was happening at the time. Anyway, I walked home, and he was sitting on my front porch. All adults made surprised noises. Katsuki, you didn't tell me that. Mitsuki said, laughter in her voice. Kaken shrugged, smiling slightly. Yeah, well, I'm not sure how he knew where I lived, probably from my scent or something. Izuku rolled his eyes, but he is a really smart cat. He ruffled his fur fondly, a warm smile that doesn't normally grace his features there. Nizu hummed. That certainly is peculiar. Very smart indeed. Nizu eyed him, a small smile twitching at his lips. It seemed real this time. Well, Katsuki, you should go off to class now, Masaru said, earning a nod from Nizu and Mitsuki. Yeah. He grumbled, setting Izuku down and getting up from his seat. He grabbed his bag and walked to the door, opening it slowly. Bye, brat. Bye, dear. Have a good day. Kaken nodded and let Izuku walk out of the room first before silently following. Izuku was picked up from behind, and he let out a small surprised squeak, but didn't move to get away. He was brought close to Kaken's chest like usual, and he nuzzled into his neck, managing a small purr. He could tell Kaken was worried about what they were talking about, though they both probably had an idea in mind. The purr died off quickly. It somehow made Izuku exhausted, and he let his eyes droop as he slumped into Kaken's hold. With school, Kaken will have something to distract himself with, but Izuku won't. Izuku will be stuck inside his head for who knows how long. He doesn't want to be stuck as a cat forever. He wants to talk. He wants to eat human food again. He wants to be an equal with Kaken and have two-sided conversations about their day. He doesn't want to be so alone anymore. Kaken was the first one in the classroom, the giant door to 1A somehow mocking Izuku as they walked inside. Kaken walked to the other side of the room, sitting in the second seat heavily. He shrugged his backpack off as he kept Izuku in his position, giving him more support by crossing his arms under him. Kaken's breathing evened out, the steady rise and fall of his chest making Izuku slowly do the same lulled him into a peaceful sleep. Izuku's ears twitched when he heard a high-pitched voice squeal quietly, and another deeper, more stiff voice follow. Sir, I must ask you to take your feet off the desk. And bringing an animal into school grounds? That is strictly prohibited. He heard a low growl vibrating through Kaken's chest, and Izuku lazily lifted his head, seeing a whole group of students staring at him with adoration, or slight confusion, some a mixture of both. Back off glasses fucker, I can do what I want, Kaken said, and Izuku made eye contact with a boy with tall purple hair and tired eyes. He looked kind of like Aizawa, and he had that same small smile as he looked at him. It is extremely disrespectful to your upperclassmen who once used this table. Izuku looked over, seeing a boy with blue hair and glasses doing a weird hand chop motion. I don't care. Kaken scoffed, and Izuku wiggled around, letting him know he wanted out. He looked into Kaken's eyes, and nudged his nose on his face, earning a round of coos. Kaken grumbled, his face taking on a soft shade of pink as he brought his legs down and set him on the desk. The blue-haired boy gasped, drawing Izuku's attention once more. You should not bring a cat here. They are ill-behaved and don't listen. Did you even think this through by bringing him here? Izuku pet his head at him, standing up and walking to the edge, turning around and sitting down, making sure his HS was on full display. He meowed loudly and in quick succession, making weird noises. He's a support animal, you dumb F-. I have permission for him to be here. You shut the F up. Izuku stopped abruptly, laying down and not looking as he heard small steps walking away. He heard a sigh from Kaken, who reached to pet him, but Izuku stood up, earning a raised eyebrow from the blonde. Izuku doesn't understand why Kaken has to be so F&G mean sometimes. He jumped off the desk with a small thump and looked around the room. All eyes were on him, and he swallowed nervously. Can I pet him? A pink girl asked excitedly, bouncing up to him and bending down. Kaken got up from his seat, the chair scraping against the floor. No, can't you F-I-N-G read? He growled, and Izuku bumped his head against her knee, shoving his body against hers as a show of permission. She squealed and began to pet Izuku soothingly, her fingers massaging his scalp so well, Izuku actually started to purr. Look at that. He likes me. He heard a low growl from Kaken. Deku, come here. Kaken said, and Izuku turned to look at him. He planned on not listening, but with the way his hands were clenching, and how tightly his jaw was shut, Izuku walked over, earning a huff from the girl. Kaken picked him up and sat down, glaring at anyone who thought of coming close. If you're here to make friends, get out. Several students jumped, and scrambled to their seats at Aizawa's voice. Aizawa stepped into the room, a sleeping bag under his arm. I'm Aizawa Shoyuda, your homeroom teacher. That took too long, I expect you to move faster next time. He sighed, eyeing everyone in the room, then pulled out a small case from seemingly nowhere. Get into your gym uniforms and meet me out in the field. He said tiredly, and the class scrambled to the front, grabbing the case with their seat numbers on it and leaving the classroom. Kaken went to leave, when Aizawa called for him to stay. Deku, will stay with me while you're doing the assessment. He'll be in the area if you need him though. He said once everyone else was gone, waving him off right after. Kaken nodded, scooping Izuku up and taking him to the locker room. When they walked through the doors, Izuku could hear happy and excited conversation. Kaken walked to the far corner, ignoring everyone's stare, and set Izuku down on a bench as he shed his clothes. Izuku's eyes surveyed the room, stopping on red and white. The boy was already staring back at him, and Izuku pet his head to the side, earning a small twitch if the lips before it quickly faded, and he turned to leave. Most of the class was staring at him, their hands twitching like they wanted to pet him. Izuku doesn't blame them, he is pretty soft. It's still pretty weird for him to be getting so much positive attention though. Izuku always preferred not being seen, because at least that meant he wouldn't be targeted if he went unnoticed. They walked out once Kaken was done changing, Izuku by his side and a whole horde of students. Izuku noticed a red head lingering beside the blonde, closer than everyone else. He didn't say anything though, which was surprising to Izuku, because he was one of the louder ones from this morning. When they got out into the field, Izuku trotted right up to Aizawa, rubbing along his legs to scratch his back. He heard a quiet huff, and then he began talking. Izuku wasn't really paying attention, something about a quirk apprehension, yada yada yada. Another thing Izuku noticed after becoming a cat is that his attention span is a lot shorter than it was when he was human. And that's saying something because his attention span was already short enough, plus he's not really all that interested. The real fun part is when they start using their quirks. He watched in vague interest as Kaken threw a softball with an explosion. Sure, it's great, but he's already seen it a million times. Hell, he's been on the receiving end of one more often than not. Aizawa started explaining something, and Izuku groomed his paw, looking up to the cloudless sky and watching a few birds pass by. He snapped back into attention when the class started talking amongst themselves excitedly, and he could tell the exact moment Aizawa tensed, his arms tight like he was clenching his fists in his pockets. He looked up to see his eyebrows drawn together. "Fun," he said, raising his voice angrily. Izuku winced at the tone, his tail swishing as he looked back to the class, who were now oddly quiet. If it's so fun, whoever places last in today's assessment will be deemed to have no potential and be expelled from the heroics course, he said, his voice clipped and cold. The class erupted again, and Izuku kept his eyes on Aizawa as he explained that life isn't fair, that the world of heroics isn't fun, before he started the tests. Izuku stood on his hind legs and put his front paws on Aizawa's leg. The scraggly man looked down, an eyebrow quirked before he sighed and picked him up. He set him inside his capture weapon, which was more comfortable than Izuku thought it was going to be, and pet him as he kept track of all the students. Izuku watched the class use their quirks in creative ways. One girl made a big pole from her body to launch herself up into the air for the standing long jump. Izuku was in awe, all these powerful quirks in one place, and Izuku got to see it all. He tried to not let the fact that he couldn't do this himself get his mood down. He was here for Kaken, not for himself. He looked at Aizawa, at how his eyebrows were still twitching together, and how his jaw was slightly clenched. Izuku nudged his nose on his cheek, rubbing his face on his and hoping to calm him down. He heard a small chuckle and was pet behind his ears. "You're really smart, huh? How'd you pick up on that so easily?" he murmured, only loud enough for Izuku to hear. Izuku paused though, he's not sure why he even did that if he's being honest. He doesn't mind helping, but he's a little shocked that he did it without even thinking. He's so used to comforting Kaken that it was like a reflex. He continued to watch the rest of the test, relaxing into the warm hold he was in and finding himself content. "Here are your scores." Izuku found himself having to peel his eyes open. He must have fallen asleep. Izuku looked up to see a hologram with names, presumably the class, going down in a line. Hagakure was the last one, and Izuku heard quiet sniffing, but couldn't pinpoint it until he saw someone with a tail patting their back. They seemed to be invisible. "Oh, by the way, no one's getting expelled." It was a logical ruse. Izuku could hear the amusement in his voice, and he rolled his eyes. That was just cruel. The class let out a collective sigh of relief and Aizawa told them to go get changed. Izuku could see Kaken lingering behind, inching closer to Aizawa as the class left. But before he could get closer, that boy with the purple hair walked up to them. "Dad," he started, and Izuku looked between both of them. It makes sense now that he thinks about it. "Yes." The boy sighed, running a hand through his hair. The boy, Mineta I think, was touching the girls inappropriately and making comments about them. Aizawa sighed, nodding. "All right, thanks Hitoshi. Another thing to deal with. Go get changed now." Hitoshi nodded, walking off silently, and Kaken stomped up immediately after. "Sensei," he said, shifting his weight. Aizawa sighed and grabbed Izuku, setting him down on the ground. Izuku stretched, shaking his fur out slightly. He misses the warmth if he's being honest. "Thanks." Kaken grunted out, scooping Izuku up and stomping away. Izuku nudged his neck with his nose, liking him to calm him down. Today Kaken seems extra irritated, but it's not like Izuku can blame him. He's always extra anxious on the first day of school too. They walked back to the locker room in silence, and Izuku couldn't figure out what was making him upset right now. Izuku watched him as he silently got changed, his face calm. By the time they made it to the classroom, Aizawa was in that yellow sleeping bag, curled up in the corner. "Bakubro!" someone called, and Izuku turned his head to see the red head walking towards them, a wide grin on his face. "What do you want, shitty hair?" Kaken growled. The boy only laughed in response, slinging an arm around his shoulder. "My hair's not even that different from yours. The name's Kirishima Aijiro." Kaken threw his arm off, stomping to his desk and gently plopping Izuku down as he sat in his seat. "Stop being such a beach." Izuku meowed at Kaken, pawing him gently. He needs friends, and judging by the way Kirishima followed them to his desk, he might be a good fit. "So, why do you need a support animal? If you don't mind me asking." Kirishima started, and Izuku mentally face-palmed. Kaken hates admitting something that makes him seem weak. Izuku got ready to comfort him, sliding off the desk and into his lap. "None of your business." Kaken grumbled, petting Izuku soothingly. "How does he deal with you? You're so angry." Another voice said, and Izuku looked over to see a small boy with purple ball on his head, a smirk on his. "Maybe that's why he needs him." The same pink girl from earlier said, "Ashido maybe." Kaken was slowly losing his patience, and Izuku meowed loudly, standing up and nuzzling into his neck. "You should give him space," Deku says to back off. A quiet voice said behind the forming crowd, and everyone looked, even Izuku did. Everyone zeroed in on a bulky boy, his features that of a pale rock. He shrunk down at all the attention, and Izuku stared at him, waiting for an explanation. My quirk. I can understand animals." He whispered, and the class started asking him to talk with Izuku, and he stared with wide eyes at the boy and at Kaken, who looked indifferent to the whole thing. This is his chance. All he has to do is tell him his real name, what happened, and he can go back to normal. He looked back at Kaken, who smiled softly at him and pet him. He can't. There's nothing for him anymore. His mom is dead. He'll go into the foster care system and no one's heard of a quirkless kid living through that. And what will Kaken think when he finds out? He'll throw him to the dirt, hate him even more for tricking him or something. He can't. By the end of the day, Izuku was tired. He underestimated how overwhelming everything was going to be, and even though he took small naps throughout the day, he was going to sleep well tonight. He was carried down the halls by a silent Kaken who had Kirishima talking his ear off. Izuku was surprised he hadn't blown him into oblivion yet, and he wonders why. Did he just hate Izuku because he doesn't have a quirk? Is that simple thing what it came down to? Izuku rested his head back on Kaken's chest, closing his eyes to stop himself from crying. Izuku hopes they become friends, real friends. Maybe Kirishima won't annoy Kaken just by being there like Izuku did. Maybe it's a good thing he's finally tolerating someone. It doesn't stop Izuku from feeling like shit though. When they got home, Izuku immediately went to sleep on Kaken's bed. He could tell Kaken was tired too, because as soon as dinner was over he came upstairs and slumped into bed, pulling Izuku close and falling asleep soon after. The even, slow rise and fall of his chest lulled Izuku into a deep sleep. Izuku sat on a plush dark green cat bed. It was soft and the perfect kind of fluffy that made Izuku relax, even through the happy chatter of the class. It was by Kaken's desk when they got here, and Izuku can't figure out who it was. Kaken made a big deal about it, sounding like it was some kind of personal insult to him. Izuku thinks it was a nice gesture though, and he likes it, so he's not sure why Kaken wanted to interrogate every one of his classmates about it. He calmed down once Izuku settled down in it though, right under his desk. The door opened and everyone shut up, scrambling to their seats and watching as Aizawa walked to the front. He surveyed the room and nodded once, like he was pleased at the results before shifting through some papers on the podium. "Good. Get out your textbooks on hero laws and read the intro," he said boredly, his eyes finding Izuku's. Aizawa narrowed his eyes playfully before slumping down into his yellow sleeping bag on the floor. Izuku stretched and got comfortable. If he didn't know any better, he'd say Aizawa was a cat. "I am walking through the door like a normal person." Izuku jerked awake, scurrying up Kaken's legs frantically, accidentally stabbing him with his claws in the process. Kaken hissed in pain, gritting his teeth as he helped Izuku up into his lap. His heart was beating frantically, and his tail swished angrily behind his back. That scared the shit out of him, and the fact that it was All Might walking through the door didn't make it any better. Kaken pet him soothingly, holding his head against him as Izuku stared at All Might. He was talking, but it felt like his ears were ringing. Not only was he stuck as a cat, having to watch Kaken become everything he wasn't, he also had to do it with All Might here too. Kaken picked him up, and walked to the front of the room to get a case, and stomped out angrily. "Stupid effing All Might," he muttered, his voice causing a vibration throughout his chest. Izuku was surprised at that. Kaken always looked up to him, but then again he did cause Izuku to scratch him. Izuku nuzzled into his neck, forcing his body to relax. This year keeps throwing his failures into his face. It's so exhausting and he doesn't know how long he can keep this whole thing up anymore. Kaken changed into his hero costume, and Izuku was ashamed at how he couldn't take his eyes off of him. Sure, he's seen him change before, but when he's in that. Kaken caught him staring, and he looked away quickly. Even though he knows the blonde won't think anything of it, it's still embarrassing. "Pervert," Kaken said as he picked him up, making Izuku's eyes widen and look at him in fear. Kaken laughed at him, drawing the attention of a few students as he carried him out of the locker room. Izuku growled under his breath, glaring at him before looking ahead. "Fing idiot." Kaken took Izuku to a mock city, followed by their shadow Kirishima, along with the rest of their class. All Might was there in all his glory, his hands on his hips with his signature smile on his face. Izuku knows All Might gave him an opportunity, but it seems that he thinks being a quirkless hero is impossible. It makes Izuku feel so bitter. All Might started talking loudly, and Izuku tuned him out, choosing to look at everyone's hero costumes instead. He likes everyone's honestly. Sure, some of them are a little unconventional and might be hard to fight in, but they want to be flashy heroes, so it fits. "Young Bakugo, hand me your pet so you can get on with the exercise." All Might said way too loudly, making Izuku's ears go down. Kaken growled under his breath, but walked forward anyway. He tried to pull Izuku away, but he held on with his claws, meowing quietly into his ear. "He can walk there with the class, he's a good listener," Kaken said after a futile attempt to tear him off, and Izuku relaxed at that, his claws retracting. "Ooh, Deku doesn't like All Might." Ashido sang behind them, and Izuku heard All Might cough into his fist as Kaken let him down, scoffing quietly. "Thus, Team A and D, you go to your designated areas while the rest of the class follows me," All Might said without missing a beat, and Kaken pet him one last time before stomping off over to the annoying blue-haired boy Ida. Izuku looked back to the class, who were all watching Izuku expectantly, not even following All Might. Izuku surveyed everyone, his eyes stopping on red and white, Todoroki he thinks, before he pranced up to him, meowing and nudging his leg. Todoroki's eyes lit up like a little kid who got the birthday present they wanted, and he slowly bent down to pick him up. "No fair," someone said behind him, and Todoroki held Izuku out at arm's length, like he was scared of hurting him. "What are you doing? We don't have all day." All Might yelled from the entrance of the door, and the class broke out of their stupor, scrambling after him. Todoroki exhaled and brought him to his chest, petting him gently. "Hey man, you should let me pet him. Bakugo never lets anyone else touch him, it's not fair." Todoroki looked down at the voice, and so did Izuku to see that same small boy from the other day. He looked at Todoroki expectantly. If Izuku's being honest, he doesn't want his grimy hands all over him, but it's not like he can just claw him away. "No," Todoroki said simply, walking ahead with a small smile twitching at his lips. "Oh thank God." They made their way through the building and ended up in a viewing room, seeing a slightly impatient All Might. "All right, now that everyone's here," he looked at Izuku like he was the source of all his problems, and Izuku glared at him. "We can start," he finished, turning to the multiple monitors as the students took their seats, Todoroki being one of them. Izuku could still see the monitors, and he listened as All Might called for the exercise to start. Kaken left Ida to guard the bomb by himself, and his tail twitched in anticipation as he stomped down the halls, right where Hitoshi was hiding behind the corner, adjusting something on the mask covering his face. He could see Kaken's mouth moving, a scowl adorning his face as he looked around, slowly inching towards Hitoshi. Everyone waited in anticipation as he rounded the corner, his eyes going wide for a brief moment before shooting his hand out and setting off a big explosion. The whole class held their breath as the smoke cleared, but Hitoshi was gone, and Kaken's brows furrowed angrily, whirling every direction and screaming loudly, though no one could hear it. Then suddenly something black shot out, and his limbs were tied to his body as he fell to the floor. Hitoshi jumped down from the ceiling, and Izuku was too busy trying to figure out how he even got there to notice him wrapping the capture tape around him. Bokugu Katsuki has been eliminated. Hero team wins. Everyone looked to the other monitor, seeing Ida floating in the air, trying to regain a semblance of balance as he whirled around. When Izuku looked back to the monitor with Kaken, Hitoshi was walking away, his capture weapon drawn back again and leaving a shocked Kaken behind. When the students got back into the room, All Might talked about what went right and what went wrong, but Izuku went straight to Kaken, who picked him up roughly and stomped over to a bench without even waiting for the student to finish speaking. When they sat down, Izuku could see how angry Kaken was. Even without high, his grip was tighter than usual, and how his breathing was picking up speed. Izuku nudged his face with his nose, liking him and trying to calm him down, but he just moved his head away, growling under his breath as he set Izuku down on the floor. Izuku stared at him, his brows pinching together as he sat down. Kaken stared at the monitor with his arms crossed and a scowl on his face, and Izuku looked at the floor. He feels so useless now that he can't help him. Is he getting tired of Izuku already? What if they send him away? He'll go to a FING animal shelter or even the streets. If he can't even make Kaken feel better, what's even left for him? Izuku lay on the floor until all the exercises were over, and when it was time to go back to class, Kaken gently picked him up. Izuku could tell he was still fuming, and he wanted to comfort him, but he didn't know how without pissing the blonde off. When they got to the house, Kaken was considerably more calm, and he was more loving towards Izuku, so that was a plus. When they got upstairs, Kaken let Izuku scurry away, and he hid under the bed just as he heard a loud bang, followed by a slurry of curses. Izuku jumped even though he was half expecting it, his ears going back. "Deku!" he called breathlessly, and Izuku shrunk down, not moving. "Deku, come here." He clicked his tongue like usual, and Izuku steeled himself as he crawled out from under the bed, his ears back and tail between his legs. Kaken was already waiting by the bed, his eyes glassy and angry. When he saw Izuku, his eyes widened slightly, and his brows furrowed like he was hurt. Are you scared of me?" he whispered brokenly, making Izuku snap his head up and stare with wide eyes. Is he scared of him? Maybe a part of him always will be, especially when he gets like this. Izuku can't help but think he's going to take his anger out on him one day. Kaken stared at him for a second, his eyes shining before he reached a hand up. Before Izuku could think, he flinched back, squeezing his eyes shut with a rapidly beating heart. "I'm not gonna hurt you, Deku. I'm not like that anymore." Izuku has a feeling that Kaken is using him as a replacement for him. To calm his guilt of what happened, or what didn't happen. To the world, Midoriya Izuku is dead, and it'll always be that way. Kaken will have to deal with that guilt forever, and Izuku will be selfish by staying with him. Izuku could hear Kaken's heavy breathing, and he opened his eyes, seeing tears falling down his face as he held his hands out non-threateningly. Izuku swallowed, walking over to him and immediately being picked up. "Don't be scared of me anymore," he whispered shakily, his voice hoarse. "I'm not, I swear." "You are an idiot, Yagi Toshinori," Nizu said chipperly, a fake and condescending smile on his face. Izuku looked back and forth between the two heroes, laying on Nizu's desk. Despite what people think of him, Nizu is a nice man. He got him wet food and fresh water. He even got him catnip too. Kaken had been told to bring him here after lunch for some field trip they were going to, and he'd been upset that he couldn't go, but at the same time, he understood that a cat shouldn't go to a hero training exercise in a whole different facility. Nizu continued to pet him absent-mindedly as he sorted through papers. "Yes, I know. But I just got so caught up in saving people that I wasn't thinking," All Might said, and Izuku glared at him. Maybe Izuku's still hung up on the fact that he crushed his dream, but he can't help it, it FING. Yes, something you don't do very often." All Might sputtered at Nizu's words, and Izuku huffed a laugh. "Well," Nizu said, sighing and interlacing his paws before All Might could say any more. "Have you found a successor at least?" All Might seemed to shrink into his chair, his sunken cheeks turning a pink shade. Well, no dash, Nizu sighed again. You're running out of time. He said seriously, his smile wiped off his face now, his eyes narrowed. All Might let out a strained breath, running a hand down his face. I know, he said, his voice muffled by his hand. I had found one, but he rejected my offer. He stared at Nizu, who sat up straighter. Really? He inquired, nodding to himself as he typed on his computer. It takes guts to reject the number one hero. You better not have pressured him. All Might shook his head, his face falling. Nizu stopped typing, looking at him expectantly. The boy, he never told me his name, but he was quirkless. He looked back up, pressing his pointer finger and thumb to his tear ducts. Ah. Nizu said quietly, and Izuku set his head down. He didn't want to hear them talk about it. About how everyone thinks he's gone when he's not. It feels like a slap in the face from the universe. I did some research and discovered his name though. I just felt this call to him from One for All. Midoriya Izuku, a bright kid who smiled even though he had no reason to. Izuku's ears and tail twitched. Well, isn't that a surprise? Nizu said, and both Izuku and All Might were surprised to see shock on his face. That boy, Midoriya, was Bakugo Katsuki's childhood friend. Did you know? He trailed off, the ending not needed to be said. All Might nodded grimly. Yes, his voice was strained, and he gripped the arms of his chair tightly. His mother followed shortly after. It's FING terrible. I can't help but think it was my fault. All Might said, grimacing. Izuku's tail was swishing freely behind him now, and he got up, circling around and laying back down again, not facing the two heroes anymore. He wants to leave. He wants Kaken to hurry the F up so he doesn't have to listen to this sheet any longer. And why would you say that? Nizu asked, and Izuku could feel All Might tense at his tone. Izuku would have if it was directed at him too. He was attacked by a villain before I offered him my quirk. He started hesitantly, sighing. Then, after everything he asked me if I thought he could be a hero. He whispered the last part, and Izuku couldn't help but wonder why he was so hesitant, almost seeming scared to say it out loud. No one thinks a quirkless person can be a hero. It's a fact of life that Izuku will always be useless. He can't even be a good support animal. It was deadly silent in the room, and even Izuku tensed, his fur fluffing up and standing on end. He stood up, ruffling around his fur, and turned to see Nizu with a small, barely there smile on his face, his tail swishing violently behind him. All Might seemed resigned to whatever this is, because his head was lowered like he was ashamed. You know the suicide rates, Yagi, he said calmly. If you are willing to work with him and give him a quirk, then he is capable of being a hero. All Might looked up, opening his mouth and taking in a breath, but Nizu held up a paw quickly, a stern expression on his face. Don't tell me it's dangerous. I'm a hero, one of the best, and you don't see me fighting giant villains now, do you? That boy is dead. I'm not saying it's your fault. One person shouldn't take all the blame, but I am glad you're taking responsibility. Because you have responsibilities, especially as the number one hero, you dash. Nizu cut himself off, taking in a deep breath and lowering his paw. Maybe you should leave so I can gather my thoughts, he suggested. His voice was light, but everyone knew it wasn't an option. All Might slowly stood up, bowing and walking to the door. Right as he set his hand on the knob, there was frantic knocking, and All Might quickly opened it. The USJ has been attacked by villains. I have contacted the police, but heroes need to be there. Present, Mike said, not even waiting for a response as he bolted down the hallway. Izuku stood up quickly, and Nizu started typing rapidly on his computer. All Might puffed up in his big form, and shot down the hallway without warning, the wind ruffling some papers and Izuku's fur. Was that where Kaken went? There are villains, actual villains attacking them. Izuku's breathing picked up. This can't be happening. What if Kaken dies too? First his mom and now him? Izuku never got to tell him that he's alive. What was he even thinking? Not telling Kaken and telling himself that everything would be fine and dandy, that as long as he was with him life would be great? He's so effing stupid. Izuku let out a small keening sound, jumping off the desk and running to the door. He bolted down the hallway running around aimlessly like that would solve all his problems. Kacchen's strong, he knows that, but these are actual villains, adults. Crazy, evil adults who are fighting a bunch of kids with no proper training. Izuku found himself in the 1A classroom, panting with tears streaming down his furry face. When had he settled for just staying like this? Staying as an animal who can't use the bathroom like a regular person, who doesn't have FING opposable thumbs. He's really weak, isn't he? As soon as something easier comes along, he gives up on everything. He was actually training to be a hero, looking at self-help videos for martial arts and practicing in between his times at the beach. Then, as soon as Kaccen started caring about him, it all went down the drain, like all that work was for nothing. And Izuku was okay with that. He swayed over to Kacken's backpack and curled up by it. It smelt like him, and Izuku needs him here, he needs him to be alive. Izuku woke up to someone gently scratching his ears, and he jerked back, blinking away the tiredness to see blonde hair and red eyes. Izuku's eyes widened, and he cried out loudly, lunging forward and almost toppling Kaccen down. Kaccen chuckled, petting him and hugging him close as Izuku liked him all over. He could hear some classmates cooing softly, but he didn't care. He's alive, Kacchen's alive, he's not leaving. Izuku. It's okay, Dad. I'm okay. He said quietly into his ear, his warm breath making it twitch backwards. I'm sorry. I'm so effing selfish. Izuku meowed loudly into Kacchen's face, and a small smile twitched at the blonde's lips. I'm okay. He said one last time, standing up fully and holding him close. The whole way home, Izuku stayed close, not even settling for sitting in his lap. Izuku didn't want to let go, he wanted to get this one last time before it would all end. It can't stay like this anymore, Izuku knows that. He knows that he should have told that boy, Kuda, as soon as he figured it out. Kaccen could have died, he could have died thinking that Izuku committed suicide and it was his fault. The next time they go to school, he's going to confess. Even if it's the scariest thing he might ever do. Kaccen deserves the truth, everyone deserves the truth. The weekend went by too slowly, Kaccen took him on walks, and spent time with him. But it felt so final, and in a way it was. Izuku knows that Kaccen will hate him after this, he'll blame him for all the guilt he felt, and Izuku agreed with him. This whole thing is his fault, none of this would have even happened if he had just told the parents about that boy's quirk. He got through homeroom, then lunch, and then it was suddenly the end of the day. Izuku's not sure he can do this. Alright, think about what I said this morning, focus on training your quirks for the sports festival. This could be a big chance for some of you. Aizawa said, then slumped down into his chair, waiting for the final bell. The bandages wrapped around his body like that made him look like a mummy. Izuku found no humor in it, and he slowly stood up, ignoring Kacken's stare in favor of putting one heavy foot in front of the other. More of his classmates were looking at him now, and could have smiled at him when he stopped in front of his desk. Izuku swallowed, looking back at Kaccen, who still had his eyes on him, before looking back. He's pretty sure he has the attention of everyone now. I need you to tell Kaccen something. Tell him my name is Midoriya Izuku, and I'm alive. His words came out as a weak meow, and Kuda seemed confused, looking up at Kaccen and shaking his head. Who's Kaccen? He asked quietly, and Izuku refused to look as he heard a chair scraping violently on the tile floor. You fucking around with me, Dr. Doolittle? This ain't funny. Kaccen growled when he got close, and the classroom was deadly quiet at his tone. Izuku and Kuda shrunk down. No. He says his name is Midoriya Izuku. And that he's alive. I'm sorry, an animal has never approached me like this before. He explained quickly, waving his hands around. Izuku looked up as Kaccen took a few steps back, glaring at them. You're effing lying. Who told you? Huh? He yelled, small explosions being set off. What's going on? Aizawa asked loudly, his voice angry and tired as he struggled to stand up from his chair. This fucker. Izuku meowed loudly. He says he gave you your nickname because he had a stutter when he was younger. Kuda repeated quickly, and Kaccen paused, his eyes widening and his breathing picking up. The class remained silent, and Izuku continued. I was walking home from the store. I was walking home from the store when a kid needed help. He accidentally used his quirk on me, and I didn't say anything because I thought it wasn't a big deal. I got stuck as a cat after that, and went to you for help." Kuda repeated, and Kakin shook his head, a scowl forming on his face as his eyes glistened. He stomped forward, and Izuku cowered down, not meeting his eyes. "You could have told me sooner. I thought you were dead," he screamed, Izuku's ears going back in response. "Hey, maybe we should dash. Shut the F up, shitty hair," he roared, and Aizawa stepped forward, setting a hand on his shoulder. Kakin aggressively shook it off and stomped over to his bag. Izuku scrambled after him, his claws extended as he ran for the door. He meowed loudly, feeling tears prick at his eyes. He knew this was a mistake, and he cowered down as Kakin hovered over him. "Move!" he growled, and Izuku's body shook as his head lowered, seeing him step over him and leave the room. The bell rang, but everyone in the room stayed rooted to their spots. Aizawa was the first to move, and he slowly walked over, bending down so he was in his line of sight. "Midoriya, right?" he asked softly, and Izuku slowly lifted his head, staring with glassy eyes at the hero. He nodded, the motion small as he let out a pathetic whine. Multiple students let out noises like they were hurt, and Izuku clenched his claws on the floor, making a scratching noise. "He's so pathetic." Aizawa reached forward, and Izuku slowly walked into his chest, feeling himself getting picked up. "You're dismissed, Shin, so come with me," Aizawa said, and then he carried a sniffing Izuku out. "Honestly, I should have figured it out sooner. I'm sorry, kid," he said quietly. Izuku just hid his face further into his capture weapon. "Dad, what the F dash dot?" Shinso said, falling into step beside them. Izuku refused to look at anyone. "We'll go to Nizu, he'll help with all of this, okay?" Aizawa said instead of answering. When they made it to the office, Izuku let his body go limp as he was handed off to Shinso, whose lips were in a thin line. "Ah, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Aizawa scoffed, walking over to the seat across from Nizu's desk and sitting down, Shinso following the movement. Nizu's beady eyes found his, and Izuku looked away, nuzzling into Shinsu's neck instead. Aizawa sighed. "We have a situation." Katsuki's head was spinning as he sprinted through the busy hallway, shoving his way through the mass crowds as he fought the burning sensation in his eyes and stomach. This is a dream, this isn't FING real. All this time, Izuku was right there while he was grieving his death, blaming himself for it. He spent countless hours silently taking accountability for the things he put him through, those jarring words that have played endlessly in his head ever since Izuku went missing, and more so when he was told the terrible news about him and Aunt Inko. He told him to kill himself. Katsuki could feel burning hot tears running down his face as he slung open the doors to the school, wiping them with his arm as an uncomfortable sob slipped past his lips. He just couldn't believe it. This was a good thing, of course. He's wanted nothing this past year other than to go back in time and take those words back, to change how he treated Izuku. He would go as far back to that fateful day at the river, and take his hand at the innocent offer to help. But he couldn't, reality nor his ego would allow him to do so he suffered and found comfort in his furry friend that seemed to appear just as he needed him. If I had just known. I should have known. He made it to the yard and slowed his pace. He could see his mom's car parked and waiting for him. He didn't want to face her. He knew she would notice Deku, or Izuku gone immediately and would want answers. Katsuki doesn't even know what to call him anymore. He got to the car and viciously swung it open, his throat burning as he resisted the sobs building up his chest, the tears flowing freely regardless of how he wiped them away. Mitsuki turned her head to look at him, a shocked expression on her face as Katsuki shook in the seat next to her. "Katsuki, what dash?" "Just drive," he croaked in response, his voice cracking as he did so, causing him to reflexively grab at his throat with wide eyes. He hadn't heard his voice like that in years. Mitsuki wordlessly put the car in gear and sped off, but that didn't stop the endless attack of questions. It started with USJ and how she didn't know how such a thing could happen to the top hero school in the world. How dangerous it was for him to be there, and he could tell through her voice that she was apprehensive about him being enrolled there now, though he refused to look at her. I just can't believe they could let such a thing happen. What if you had died? She raised her wobbly voice. Katsuki could tell that his mom was fighting tears now. I can't lose you too. She whispered softly, resting her head against the steering wheel. He hadn't even noticed they were in the driveway now. The ride was unusually short. Maybe it's because he knew at some point he would have to tell them. She paused and slowly looked up at Katsuki. Where's Deku? Please don't tell me he went there with you. Just stop talking. Please, he responded roughly, his fists clenched so tightly his nails bore into his skin. He quickly got out of his seat and in one swift motion, opened and slammed the car door shut, brushing past his dad without a word as he ran up the stairs, slamming his room door behind him. His head was reeling from Deku to the USJ attack. He felt utterly useless. Out of reflex he went to call for Deku. He needed the comfort no matter how much he would deny it, but he froze. The guilt that had been consuming him for the past few months finally broke like a dam, and he roughly sat on his bed, his hands balled into fists as he rested his head on them. He let out shuddering breaths, his chest heaved and his eyes swelled with tears as he let out painful sobs. Though the relief he felt at the news his childhood friend was alive eased the pain, he knew he couldn't face him, not now at least. He was too ashamed. Izuku woke up slowly, the bright sun shining through his eyelids as he cracked them open. He didn't want to face everyone, not after how Katsuki responded. The disturbed looks on everyone's faces in Class 1A, as Aizawa explained the situation to Nizu, and his trademark smirk slowly dropping from his face. The jarring reality of the fact that Izuku had been there the whole time, and no one noticed, hung in the air like a guillotine ready to drop at any moment. It's been a week since the truth came out, and he hasn't seen the Bakugos once, not even Katsuki. He could feel his eyes burning at the thought he was hating him all over again, that maybe he blamed him for what happened and not telling him sooner. It was too late now though, no matter how much Izuku wishes he could do it differently. Aizawa had made the decision to take Izuku in. Shinso had begged his dad, and after talking on the phone with Mitsuki, explaining the situation as she listened, the other line rang with silence. She had told them that Katsuki didn't want him to be over anymore. She told them that it hurt too much, but Izuku wasn't fooled. He was angry at him, he just knew it. There was no fixing this now, but a selfish part of Izuku wished he had never said a word, because at least then he would still have his best friend. He was broken out of his raging thoughts as he heard rustling next to him. Right. He was in Shinsu's room now, and had been for the past week. They've been good to him when they didn't have to be, and Izuku was extremely grateful that he got so lucky. Hey Izuku, how'd you sleep? Came a gentle voice, followed by an equally gentle scratch behind the ears. Izuku yawned wide. He hasn't had a good night's rest at all this week, but he still got up and stretched before walking over to the purple-haired boy and plopping right next to him. That morning was the same as always. They had breakfast and talked about the normal plans for the day that Izuku would tend to tune out. Except today had one jarring difference. He would go back to UA for the first time since he told Kuda everything. They had given him that week to relax and recuperate, so to speak, because today they would have him talk to Kuda and try to get as much information about the boy's quirk as possible. Do you think he's gonna be okay? Whispered Shinso as he slowly looked his way. Izuku could tell Aizawa was trying his best not to say, I don't know, what do you think? In a sarcastic tone, but instead he just sighed and shook his head. The best we can do is be here for him. I can't imagine what's running through his head right now, poor boy. They were talking like Izuku couldn't hear them, and it made his ears twitch. He laid his head down and waited as they got their school supplies ready for the day. It was going to be a long one. Aizawa had told Izuku that they would sit down with Nizukuda and the Bakugos, including Katsuki, after the school day was over. He definitely wasn't looking forward to that. He let out a big sigh that made Shinso look down at him with a frown as he carried him down the hallway. Aizawa had parted ways to have a conference meeting with the principal and the rest of the teachers, no doubt about him. Izuku hated all this attention, and he hated the growing pit he felt in his stomach the closer they got to the classroom. Don't worry Izuku, it's gonna be okay, I'll be with you through the whole day, he sighed out. And if that Bakugo guy messes with you, he grumbled, trailing off as he did so. Izuku couldn't help but roll his eyes though. He didn't think Katsuki would hurt him, not after everything. He wouldn't. Izuku nuzzled into Shinsu's neck as they entered the classroom, too ashamed to see all of their pity-filled faces upon seeing him, now knowing. The loud chatter quickly ceased, and after a pause, he heard the loud scraping of a chair and quickly after, loud footsteps stomping towards him. He knew who it was immediately. "Give him here, eyebags." Katsuki grumbled. There was no anger in his voice though, and it surprised Izuku enough that he lifted his head up, seeing red eyes staring at him, puffy red eyes. Had he been crying? He didn't understand that because of what Mitsuki said, didn't he not want him around anymore? Shinso pulled Izuku away, his hold becoming firmer, more protective, and he saw Katsuki's face turn to a scowl as he let out a growl. But before it could escalate, Izuku squirmed out of his hold, seeing the blonde boy's eyes widen as he held his hands out to him. Shinsu's grip loosened with a sigh and Izuku leaped into Katsuki's arms, letting out a weak meow, and he dug his claws into his uniform. Most of the class let out a collective "ah" sound, some squealing loudly. Katsuki huffed at this as he took Izuku out of the classroom and into the empty hallway. Izuku. He paused at hearing his name past Katsuki's lips. When was the last time he called him that? "I am so sorry," he sniffled out, his shoulders shaking as he let out a rasped breath. "I should have been so much better to you, but I just couldn't admit to myself how much I looked up to you." The green-haired boy, now Cat, felt himself falter at those words. The words he'd wanted to hear his whole life, especially from the explosive blonde boy now holding him. The blonde sighed shakily, his hold firm and protective, like he never wanted to let him go again. "I'm just so glad you're alive," he whispered shakily. Izuku clung tighter to him, wanting to say so much but unable to. "We're gonna fix this and everything will go back to normal, I promise." He felt hope swell in his chest at these words, something he hadn't felt in a long time, even before that little boy turned his world upside down. A new determination bubbled up like never before. How had he lost all the motivation he had built up all his life? No matter the obstacle, Izuku had never given up before, so why now? He was going to be human again, no matter what it took. "I'm going to be myself again." Both physically and mentally, Izuku had changed so much this past year. Reality had hit him straight in the face in more ways than one, and in a way he was grateful for it because he wasn't as naive as he was before. It gave him the strength to push forward, because if he could get through this, he can get through just about anything, he decided. The final bell rang and Katsuki begrudgingly walked back to the classroom. A shaky sigh escaped the blonde's mouth and Izuku could feel his shoulders relax fully, and the green cat felt himself do the same at the action. It was going to be okay. As they walked through the giant doors, everyone stopped to look at them, going silent. It made Izuku twitch at the attention. It's something he doesn't think he'll ever get used to. Katsuki clicked his tongue in annoyance. Although he's sure the blonde is used to getting attention, he could tell he didn't like this kind. "Hey man, you good?" Izuku turned his head to see Kirishima. He laid his hand on Katsuki's shoulder, a look of pinched worry on his face. Katsuki scoffed, but didn't shove his hand away. He just walked forward calmly. "I'm fine," he grumbled, moving to sit at his desk. Izuku noticed Mineta's seat was empty and he narrowed his eyes. He remembers Shinso saying something about his behavior towards the girls in the class. Good riddance. He turned his head towards the purple-haired boy, and he could see a slight pained expression on his face as he stared into green eyes. Izuku felt bad. He'd spent some time with the soft-spoken boy, and grew fond of him. Shinso would talk to him, like really talk to him, not like how everyone else does with their baby voices, treating him like some animal. But Izuku supposes he is one, so he doesn't blame them. It was nice, and he learned that he had a lot in common with him, and he hoped they could be friends once he was back to normal. Shinso looked down at his table, his hands in his lap as he did so. Izuku would find him after lunch and try to apologize. Everyone in the class had slowly started chatting amongst themselves again, though Izuku couldn't tell when, but it eased his nerves slightly as he stood up on Katsuki's legs, his paws on his chest as he nuzzled into him. "Tifu, what are you doing?" Katsuki chuckled slightly, and when Izuku looked up at him, he saw a small blush forming on his face and neck. This caused the boy to tilt his head to the side. Katsuki still lifted his hands to scratch the back of Izuku's ears simultaneously though, a small smirk on his face. This made him close his eyes and purr like an engine. He missed the smell of burnt sugar around him and the warmth from Katsuki's body heat. He hadn't realized how much comfort it brought him. The door swung open and in came a tired-looking Aizawa, more tired than usual, but he started the class nonetheless. "This is quite the predicament we've found ourselves in, isn't it?" Nizu said with a light chuckle. Maybe he was trying to lighten up the mood, but everyone in the room remained stiff, especially Kuda. The boy was fidgeting with the bottom of his blazer as they all sat around the big desk of the principal. The Bakugas sat next to each other to the left, Kuda in the middle, and Aizawa on the far right, looking as gruff as ever with a slight twitch in his right eyebrow, something even the bandages all over his face couldn't cover. Izuku didn't think he'd ever seen Masaru so worried and perplexed, even with the time they've all had to process and digest the information. Let's go ahead and just start then," Nizu said chipperly, crossing his paws together as his face darkened slightly. "I want to start by saying that this will not be publicized, at least for the time being. For everyone's safety and privacy, there's already a major spotlight on this school since the USJ attack, and with the sports festival around the corner, it could get very overwhelming," he continued, looking at Izuku. The green-haired cat could understand that, and to be fair, he didn't want everyone to know. Mitsuki cleared her throat. "So you're saying you don't want to look bad? Is that it?" Izuku turned to see a furious expression painted on the blonde woman's face, her fists clenched at her side. "Mom dash," Katsuki was cut off as Nizu held a paw up reassuringly. "Mrs. Bakugu, think about what has happened already and what could possibly happen if we publicly announce that a young boy has been living as a cat for about a year and a half now, and no one, not even you I might add, noticed?" Nizu's face turned to an expression of fierce judgment, pausing as if daring her to disagree. She said nothing, slouching slightly as she looked at Izuku with wide hurt eyes. "There are some things that are out of even our hands, Child Protective Services being one of them." Izuku's eyes widened at that. He hadn't thought of the idea of someone taking him away. "But you're a hero, for God's sake. You could pull some strings, couldn't you?" Mitsuki combated, standing up and slamming her hands on the desk in front of her. Nizu didn't once break eye contact with her. "We are, and it's true that we could arrange something, but that doesn't mean the government wouldn't put up a fight for custody rights. From what I'm aware of, he still has living relatives." Izuku and Katsuki both stiffened at this. The possibility of him being shipped off into the States flashed in his mind, away from everything he knows and holds dear, to someone he doesn't even know. Am I correct on this information? Everyone in the room stopped to look at him, and he realized he should probably say something. He looked at Kuda, who was wearing a look of discomfort with slightly flushed features, and he felt bad for dragging some stranger into his personal business. He swallowed dryly. "It's true, my father lives in America for work, but I haven't seen him since I was a toddler. I don't have many memories of him, but what I can remember isn't good," he pleaded, and when Kuda hesitantly relayed the words, everyone in the room stiffened at the implication. "As I was saying, it is in everyone's best interest to keep this matter private." Nizu broke the silence, matter-of-factly. Mitsuki sighed, and Masaru laid a comforting hand on hers. "Whatever you need us to do, we'll do it." Masaru spoke up for the first time since entering the room. Everyone looked at him, earning nods, and Mitsuki relented, pinching the bridge of her nose as she closed her eyes. "Okay," she whispered. "Whatever we need to do." "So, what was the name of that boy who hit you with his quirk?" the principal asked, a pen in his paw as it hovered over a small rectangular notebook. The following days were filled with anticipation as the search for the Siko family went underway. The adults had decided it would be in Izuku's best interest if he stayed with Aizawa, though he was able to go visit and spend nights over at the Bakugu residence, much to Katsuki's displeasure. But he didn't put up much of a fight. Izuku was sure he didn't want to stress everyone out on top of the high alert everyone was on with the USJ villain attack. Izuku had learned they went by the name the League of Villains. It caused Izuku to shudder at the thought of an organized crime group that had a bigger agenda than that of the average Yakuza group. One specifically to kill the symbol of peace and shatter the safety everyone felt since the symbol first emerged, disrupting the chaos that reigned for years prior. "Hey kids." He was broken out of his thoughts by the gruff voice of Aizawa, stepping into Shinsu's room with a light knock. They had been relaxing as it was the weekend, the sports festival only being 2 days away. Izuku could tell the tired boy was strung with nerves as he did just about everything he could to take his mind off of it. He cleaned his room, finished off all his homework other than his math class, painted his nails, then Izuku's claws, which he didn't mind if he was being honest. After that he ate and took a break to scroll on his phone with Izuku snuggled up close to him, a comforting hand petting him every now and then. It was honestly nice, that is until he got an advertisement on his phone for the big UA festival tournament, and his nerves shot back up immediately as he picked most of the freshly dried nail polish off, then sawed his actual nails down like a DM beaver with his teeth, and he would have gone straight for the skin around it if Izuku hadn't intervened and calmed him down. He was getting better at not doing it so much. The two-person family had told him he didn't need to comfort them, knowing how much Izuku himself had suffered in silence the past year. It was still hard for him though. He found purpose in helping Katsuki through the grief he had felt, and with everyone else it had just been second nature by that point. Sue him, he loved helping people in any way he could, and being a goddamn cat sure as hell wasn't going to stop him. Plus it makes him dizzy watching Shinso pace and swirl around his room like a tornado, finding new things to do out of seemingly nothing. Izuku had to give it to the boy, he definitely knew how to keep himself distracted. After about 5 minutes of Izuku trying to calm him down, Shinso had gotten right back up to swirl some more, giving a quiet, "thank you," as he almost catapulted Izuku off of his lap with no warning as he got up from his bed. Izuku just sat on the bed, perplexed as his head sharply followed the purple-haired boy's quick movements as he buzzed around his room. He even started doing random crunches like he wasn't already toned enough in the first place, his face pinched with focus and determination. It wasn't until Shinso saw Izuku watching him as he pulled his head up that he snapped out of his mania, his eyes slightly wider and face red with embarrassment, almost like he forgot he was even there in the first place. Izuku remembers pinning his head to the side at this, thinking that, if he could physically laugh, he definitely would be. "It's time to head out," Aizawa started, looking around the room with pinched eyebrows as his mouth stayed frozen in an O shape as he finished his sentence. "Jesus kid, how many demon times are you gonna rearrange your room?" he asked, perplexed as he looked at Shinso. The boy in question sat up from his earlier task, ducking his head and his ears a burning red color as he rubbed the back of his neck roughly. That's another thing Izuku watched Shinso do. Each time he seemingly found different spots for things and more wall space to put up decorations. I just needed something to do to keep my mind off the festival coming up," he settled on, seemingly having to think of the right words to use. Aizawa sighed fondly, walking up to him and playfully ruffling his unstyled hair. "Listen, you're going to do DMN amazing at the festival, you don't have anything to worry about, I promise. You learned from the best, right?" he said more so than asked, earning a scoff from the boy as he turned his head to the side, looking at Izuku and smiling slightly. His eyes softened and he looked back up from his crouched position on the floor. "Yeah, I guess." He rolled his eyes as he said it, earning a click of the tongue from Aizawa. Izuku made a small chirping noise and slowly blinked his eyes at Shinso, hoping to convey that he agreed with his caretaker. This earned a genuine smile from the boy, and it made Izuku's chest swell with affection towards him. "Are you guys ready to go then?" Aizawa asked, looking towards both of the boys. Izuku swallowed and jumped down from the bed as Shinso nodded, still staring at Izuku with sad eyes and a look of what Izuku seemed as pity. It was going to be a rough day. They were going to his apartment today. Aizawa had informed him that an anonymous person had been paying for the rent of the unit since his mom's passing, which perplexed everyone. Even more so when they couldn't track down who it was, but Izuku was grateful nonetheless. He could go get some of his favorite things he had since childhood and his belongings that he thought he would never see again. It was a nice breath of fresh air that he didn't know he needed. The drive to his old apartment was painfully slow. Aizawa had played music the whole way through to fill the awkward silence as they drove, no one knowing what to quite say after Izuku's mood had obviously shifted. It wasn't that he wasn't excited, he was ecstatic even, but it was definitely painful to go revisit all the memories that abruptly ended for him. It hurt more to know that he could never make more, that his mom would never see him grow up and live out his dreams. He would never see his mom grow old and be there to take care of her like she did for him all these years. What hurt the most, though, was the fact that his mother died thinking Izuku, her quirkiness son, committed suicide without even leaving so much as a note behind. It hurt that Izuku knew his mom committed suicide. He knew because his gut feeling was never wrong, he knew because no one wanted to tell him why, and not because they didn't know. It was a touchy subject for everyone and he knew it. They neared the last corner that Izuku knew so well from walking to and from school every day. They passed the old decrepit building that had been abandoned for years, graffiti covering its brick surface, and then, there it was. The place he had known his whole life, the place he called home. Looming over him in a foreboding way as they all undid their seatbelts and swiftly got out of the car. You take as much time as you need, okay? Just put your paw on anything you want to take with you and we'll set it to the side and box everything up. Aizawa said as he opened the trunk of his car to pull out a few broken down boxes they had got beforehand. If it all becomes too much for you, we'll just leave and take whatever we can at a later date. He finished as he slammed his trunk shut and walked up to the boys. He gave Izuku a comforting scratch behind the ears that he leaned into, closing his eyes and meowing quietly into Shinso's hold. Shinso nodded approvingly as Aizawa removed his hand and gestured for them to head forward. They went up the stairs and trudged to his unit. Izuku watched as the gruff man pulled a small silver key from his pocket that he had gotten beforehand and inserted it into the doorknob. He fought with it for a second. Izuku wishes he was able to tell him that you had to pull it towards you, not push away from you in order for it to unlock. His apartment was full of small quirks that only he and his mom had grown accustomed to. The hero was smart though, and he figured it out after a few more tries and right when Shinso asked if he needed him to try in a sarcastic tone. Under different circumstances, Izuku supposes he would find the scene funny. A pro-hero awkwardly rustling with his locked door as his face grew more red by the second, with his adopted son snickering quietly while teasing him. He decided it was funny and let himself bask in the moment. Aizawa let out a sigh as the lock finally gave in, a triumphant look on his face as he gave a satisfied grin Shinso's way. He huffed in response, rolling his eyes. Izuku's body buzzed as they slowly entered the apartment, his eyes wide as they walked down the hall. The living room and kitchen were straight ahead, their purple couch dusty from the months of abandonment. Izuku noticed a rancid smell and realized that all the food that was in the unit most definitely went bad. He could tell Shinso and Aizawa were trying their best not to react, no doubt trying to be respectful. It made him duck his head in embarrassment. All this time someone had been paying rent and utilities but they couldn't stop by to make sure everything was cleaned up? Izuku knew he shouldn't feel angry at this, but he couldn't help the growing rage building in his stomach at the thought. This was his life right here, and now he had to worry if it would carry the permanent stench of rot for the rest of his life. Izuku squirmed in Shinso's hold, letting him know he wanted down. The tired boy obliged and gently let him leap from his arms. He let out a small grunt as he did so, trotting excitedly around the house. I know he's not a real cat, but he's so goddamn cute when he does certain things. He could hear Shinso whisper to Aizawa, who hummed in agreement. Izuku rolled his eyes but kept going forward, walking through the familiar hall until he stopped in front of his mom's room. He hesitated for only a moment, seeing the door was cracked open enough for his to push the narrow entry open wider. It was exactly how he remembered it. The old wooden dresser across from her bed, which had a light purple duvet spread across it, pillows the same color but with embroidered flowers decorating them. The window was directly across from Izuku, and even from here he could see the cityscape. The room itself was pretty barren, not much decor save for a few family pictures hung on the walls. He turned his head and saw something that he knew definitely wasn't there before, and walked closer. What he saw stopped him dead in his tracks. There, on top of her bedside table, was a picture of Izuku, candles and a few of his personal things placed carefully around it. It was an altar. Had his mom immediately came to the conclusion that he killed himself? He couldn't stand to see any more and bolted out of her room, down the hall and straight for his room. He just wanted to get in and get out. This was all too much to bear. He didn't slow down as he went to push his head through his door like he had done with his mother's, not paying much attention. Except this time, the door didn't budge and he ran into it full speed head first. A loud bang rang across the small apartment as he roughly fell back from the force, letting out a loud squeak. He shook his head with his eyes closed, sniffling before he let out sneezes from the pain in his nose. Rushed footsteps could be heard as he pawed at his sore nose, his eyes watering and his head pounding. "Jesus, what the hell, are you okay?" Shinso asked as he squatted next to Izuku on the floor. He let out a pitiful sound as he leaned into the boy, who was petting him soothingly. Izuku looked up at the door with sad watery eyes. Everything he needed was just past it. The small room will maybe allow him some form of closure. Aizawa sighed and reached down to pet him before gently opening the door and letting Izuku walk past. All Might practically hit them in the face, from the giant poster on the wall, the American flag-style curtains covering the windows as soft light such past them, illuminating the clean room. DMN. Aizawa let slip, his eyes wide as he looked around at all the number 1 hero memorabilia. He smirked at the small cat. Must be his number 1 fan with all this shirt stuff. He coughed out the last part, earning a shove to the ribs from Shinso as he shushed the man. Izuku burned with embarrassment and he realized this must look kind of creepy in other people's eyes. Aizawa just grunted as he walked out of the room, leaving the 2 boys alone. It was comforting being back in his own safe space. He hadn't been here in so long. "I can't blame you for being a big fan, he is pretty great, isn't he?" Izuku just did a small nod to the boy as he shyly walked over to his desk, crouching down and smoothly jumping onto his chair. Izuku hasn't really thought about All Might in a long time. He leaned on the desk, his 2 front legs tasting on the edge as he nudged his singed notebook with his nose and looked at Shinso expectantly. "You want to take these with you?" he asked softly as he gestured to the hero analysis number 13, his eyes finding the other 12 carefully placed in order with a small book stopper at the end of them. They heard rustling outside of the door followed by Aizawa walking in the room, a fully taped-together box, the outer flaps still open and swinging loosely. They started with all 13 of his notebooks, then moved to his comforter and had decided that they would come back for the mattress at a later date so Izuku could have his own room when the quirk situation was solved. A few of his most prized All Might collectibles and some more hero merchandise and memorabilia went in another box, filling relatively fast. Izuku searched and searched but couldn't find the one thing he really needed really, as Aizawa and Shinso both went through his closet to get him some essential clothes and pajamas. He couldn't find it. His most prized possession since he was a child. He huffed in frustration. He couldn't find his All Might trading card he had got with Katsuki, one of the last times they had a good time together, before he was the quirkiness Deku. Izuku needed to find it no matter what. Maybe it was the combination of the villain attack, his skewed perception of All Might after, and all the events that transpired the past year, but he can't remember the last place he put it, not even the last time he saw it. He scrambled under the bed in his last hope, a desperate attempt that he didn't think would work, but he wanted to cover all his bases so he could at least say that he tried. They were almost done getting the last of his things now. Izuku could hear them chatting softly about the sports festival, and taping the edges of the boxes together. No. Izuku could feel his eyes burn with tears as he stared down at the carpet, his vision blurring. He thought about how shitty his luck was, and wondered why the universe couldn't just allow him one good thing to help ease the pain. He curled into a small ball under the bed, his eyes heavy and his body tired. He just wanted to sleep. As he felt his consciousness slip away, he briefly thought about never waking up.